This young man with an absurdly handsome face but a perpetually gloomy expression is our protagonist. Alone used to be a slave, working 78 hours a week. And now he's possessed the body of a nobleman in a fantasy world. Sounds great, right? Well, sure, it sounds great. However, the character he possessed has the setup of being illiterate and utterly talentless, spending his days eating and playing, living uselessly like some count's spoiled son. The only thing he doesn't know is exactly where he is right now. Just as Alone was enjoying the pampering of the maidservants, one maid beside him reminded, "My lord, you should rest early. The young masters will return tomorrow." Alone, surprised, asked, "Young masters?" The maid replied in astonishment, "Young Master Leo and young Master Tonio. You sound like you've never heard of the Palatial family." At those words, Alone froze solid. The name Palatial hit him with such terrifying familiarity it was almost comical. The maids looked at him with worried faces. Master Alone pressed his face into the cushions in anxiety. Could this be Psyche Deliria? Alone recalled the title of a game he'd played, the game he used to play during the rare spare moments. Back when he was an office slave, it was a turn-based RPG. No matter which storyline players started on, once the 5 great sins appeared: wrath, greed, sloth, pride, obsession. The kingdom, noble houses and cities would begin to collapse catastrophically. Among them, the Palatial Count family was the most notorious. A decadent noble house that shows up in a side quest before the main plot really kicks off. Alone dropped to his knees in despair. "Right, I know this place too well," he thought as he rummaged through his memory for details about that family. Alone stared at the grand mansion before him with hopelessness. Really? Why does it have to be the Palatial Counts, the very first to be destroyed by the 5 great sins? Please, I'd rather go back to being a slave working 78 hours a week, living in comfort with no meaning, only to have everything fall apart in 10 years. Feels worse than being 6 months unpaid. Why does someone who slipped through worlds like me get 0 perks? Wait, perks? Right, knowing the game's plot 10 years ahead basically means I know the future, doesn't it? If so, all I need to do is remove the causes of the cataclysm before they happen. And so, determined to enjoy a peaceful, noble life, he decided to reform the 5 great sins. He told himself, they're probably still kids. Maybe there's still a chance to save them? 2 months later, in his study, reporting, "I've rescued orphans from the East. More precisely, victims turned into living test subjects. Among them, I assigned the management of the orphanage to a girl named Yusha." Alone beamed with satisfaction, eyes shining. "See, my judgment wasn't wrong. You're truly very capable." Evan replied, "Yes, sir, but that's a compliment, right? Because the young master never shows emotion on his face." He nodded to confirm. Then Evan, "From now on I expect you to assist me more." Evan stammered, "This is really hard to get used to." Alone looked at his reflection and thought, this face used to be very expressive, but it seems only the skin part didn't fully come to life. Evan is one of the rare supporting characters in the game, a loyal man, so he was summoned. Evan said, "Anyway, thank you for the compliment, young master. But this time you said the raid was to rescue the girl named Yusha, right?" Alone answered, "Yes." Evan continued, "I must admit now I understand why you chose her. Even with my seasoned eye, I wandered many years among mercenaries. That girl was by no means ordinary." He recalled the scene when they entered the prison to rescue the children. Evan was astonished. "She was so strong I couldn't understand why she obediently let herself be imprisoned like that. Why didn't you bring her back here? Wouldn't that be a loss for you?" Alone agreed. "A fair point," he pondered. "On the surface it may look like I'm wasting a power I don't use, but keeping things as they are is also part of the plan. Yusha is a bloodline who signed a pact with an indescribable otherworldly entity, possessing unfathomable power, and later will become Wrath, one of the 5 great sins responsible for hundreds of deaths. But if the girl is raised in a peaceful environment, she surely won't walk the path of ruin. So I've defused the first ticking time bomb. Now I just need an excuse for not bringing her here." Alone spoke up, "Yes, that's right." He propped himself up, emphasizing, "Because the time isn't right yet." Evan exclaimed in surprise, "The time isn't right yet?" Alone nodded, "Yes. Make sure this doesn't leak and provide for the girl properly. He received the order. Understood, sir. Suddenly he produced an item. Oh, and give this to Yusha. Evan wondered. A letter? Is the content important? Alone replied. Just a letter of concern. She's been through horrific biological experiments, so I thought a little comfort might calm her. He took it. You even write letters like that? I'll deliver it carefully. After that, he stood by the window watching Evan ride away on horseback. Alone fretted. I wonder if it will actually comfort her. The true content hidden in that letter of concern was something he'd heard dozens of times while playing the game. It was the charm to befriend bloodlines so it would have a calming effect. Rasfelsin, calm yourself. The sorrow of darkness, the oblivion of light, a talent's aspiration, a binding vow. These are all chants that appear in Wrath's storyline. But by then, she had been completely corrupted, cold, and it was already too late. In the game, after failure it would transition into a battle. But now everything was set 10 years earlier, so maybe it's not too late. Alone stretched and complained. One of the 5 death flags has been removed, so is it time for the next one? Thinking that a single chant could befriend a monster is truly ridiculous. But after all, they're a race that worships the otherworldly, so it's plausible it works. Those at the extremist fringe of the zealots have minds that are hard to fathom. Elsewhere, Yusha sat silently holding the letter. Evan was startled. The mana still radiating from the girl was absurd, but the girl carried a strange quality, as if she had no emotions at all. She spoke. You sent that letter, was it Lord Alone, right? Why didn't he call me to his side? Panic gripped him inwardly. What the hell is going on? Evan stammered. That's. He looked at Yusha. Mana manifesting physically only happens at a master level. He recalled your words. Because the time isn't right yet. Evan hurriedly said, oh right. It's because it's not the right moment. She then withdrew her murderous intent. As for the letter's content, remember this. The sorrow of darkness and the oblivion of light will gradually fade away. Yusha was moved. Surely that's a promise only the master would know. All right, I roughly understand. He was terrified, sweat running down his body from vigilance. She smiled eerily. I will obey his will. Meanwhile, lying in bed, Alone thought, today was a truly satisfying day. Even the bright moon seemed to cheer me on. Must do my best for the next round. Over here, a pile of books fell off the shelf onto Alone's head. He squatted on the floor complaining, there's nothing here either. Hunting for clues about the third threat is giving me a headache. Evan rushed over. Young master, we've rescued the second child you mentioned. Now there was a bump on his head. He said, really? You treated the child kindly, right? He replied, of course. After that child left the illegal slave market, suddenly the door was kicked open. An aggressive guy strode in. Isn't this the place? This was the second young master of the Palacio Counts. Con. Yo. He nudged him. How does an illiterate like you end up holding a book? Oh right. I heard you've been studying lately, haven't you? He glared. Your brother around? Alone thought to himself. He's always such a pain. How did I put up with this before? I really wanted to push back, but immediately acted obedient, bowed and said, it seems you still want to use the library, so I'll take my leave. Tonio triumphantly stomped on his head. You know your place, huh? Suddenly a knife flew across him. On closer look, the knife was embedded in the wall. At that moment someone entered from afar and said coldly, you insects are being too noisy. Tonio felt extremely irritated. The eldest young master stepped forward, pointed at them and said sternly, I don't want to see blood first thing in the morning, so get out. This was Leo Palacio, eldest young master. Immediately the two lunged at each other. Brother, I told you to drop the rude attitude when entering the library. Leo shot back. Leave while you still can. Alone quietly slipped away on this side. The Palacio territory had quickly disappeared from the game. Alone recalled his mission, investigate the Palacio domain of the Kingdom of Asteria. It was a den of vice, led by Avalon, but their power was greater than he expected. Basically, these filthy brothers were vying for the head of the family. One was a big player in the underworld, the other ran a large drug syndicate. Alone thought to himself that for the sake of his life he couldn't confront the two. So he and Evan quietly let the two beat each other up and snuck away. Inside the library, brutal fighting echoed non-stop, objects flying everywhere. Evan fixed his hair. Alone thought to himself he'll live happily ever after as the weak, useless, illegitimate son. He then returned to his room, groaning in a lazy way. Still, the second child was by no means ordinary. Alone, relaxing, turned to look at him with a puzzled expression. Evan wondered how someone like him knew about the illegal slave market and the secret biological experiments happening in other lands. How on earth? On the other side, he yawned lazily, seeming very hard to rouse, still lying in bed complaining, "So tired." Evan blurted out, "Young master, you're truly peculiar. You sent that child to an orphanage." Alone didn't look at him. He wondered, did he say that child is not ordinary? That boy wasn't just extraordinary. He was at a destructive level. Within an empire, a coalition of many nations centered on the kingdom of Kallian. The child we rescued from the illegal slave market was the second incarnation in Psyche Deliria, Deus MacAllan. After being sold into slavery and abused, shuffled from place to place, he became the embodiment of one of the 5 great sins, sloth. He transformed into something demonic and then destroyed nations in the most horrifying ways one could imagine. At this stage of the storyline, many players were shocked by the game's brutality. Contrary to the title Sloth, he was actually extremely industrious and would repay both kindness and hatred many times over. That's why I had to emphasize to Evan to treat Deus very kindly. He trembled, holding his teacup, and breathed, "That's vivid." Alone calmly said, "The reason I sent him to the orphanage is because the time isn't right." Evan replied, "I had thought of that earlier. So the letter you sent Yusha was about the second child?" Alone recalled the letter and answered, "Yes, and there's some small talk too. I told the girl to look after the somewhat sickly child I sent." The boy's figure there looked so lonely, his whole body covered in wounds. At that moment, a pair of tiny feet walked over. A voice sounded from behind Deus. "You're broken." The voice remained calm. It bore the mark of that thing. His hand moved slightly. Yusha appeared before Deus, touched him, and asked, "You're Black Yang, right?" She smiled and added, "Yet the great moon still chose you. Congratulations." Yusha wore a witch-like, villainous smile, magic radiating strongly from her entire body. "So feel the power granted to you and let your potential be unleashed." She reached out to Deus and smiled. "If you keep your loyalty and obey his orders, you'll get your revenge." At that moment, threads of magic began to emanate from behind him. Yusha smiled and looked up at the letter. "Now I should send my first reply." Under the moonlight, Alone's written lines appeared. She wanted to send him a gentle greeting. At the Count's manor where they lived, Evan opened the door and stepped in. Alone was still muttering, "Where on earth is the third person?" He suddenly said, "Big trouble, sir." Evan continued, "That bastard, the second young master." Alone looked up at that. "What?" He asked if that one was dead. At this point, the second young master's death had happened unexpectedly. He wondered, really? Then everyone gathered at the venue for the second young master's funeral. 2 beautiful girls stood on either side of Count Palacio, cooing, "Master." The other one whined, "When will this end?"
I'm bored.
The one beside him chimed in, "I'm hungry." Alone was speechless. "Bringing drugs and women to your son's funeral? This family is rotten, total dark fantasy material." Alone looked down at his brother. After all, Tonio dying from an accidental fall was different from what he remembered. In the game, the guy beside him was the murderer. In the end, he wailed theatrically, "At last I killed that vermin after 50 years. Now I'm the rightful heir. I am Count Palacio." He wept and gloated as if this were the opportunity of a lifetime. Alone looked over helplessly. Couldn't he at least fake some restraint? The mastermind was surely Leo or his lackeys. Anyway, Alone just needed to deal with the 5 great sins. Time jumped forward 1 year. The succession issue was settled. Leo consolidated the drug business, and the Count's domain grew noticeably calmer. At this point, Alone and Evan sat facing each other. He ate while staring at the stack of papers in front of him. Meanwhile, Yusha and he had become pen pals. If he kept in touch with her, it could pay off later. In the letter, Yusha began, Yuna is great at hide-and-seek. Hayden's a terrific fighter. Deus is growing fine and the boy likes puppetry. Alone read and smiled slightly. The kids seemed well behaved. At the bottom was this month's patron list. Alone exclaimed, the list grew again. It's amusing how more sponsors keep turning up for that little orphanage. Evan noted it's odd but ultimately a good thing. Oh right, about what you've been looking for. Evan said, I got a call from the Information Guild. They found a lead. Hearing that he ate and said, really? What a relief. It's probably a list of names for the third boss. Finally, I can track him down. At that moment, sunlight poured through the window and lit the room. The two fell silent, each occupied with his own task. Elsewhere, a heartrending scream rang out. It came from the Margot drug distribution point. Two men walking and chatting. The Palacio fish is generous. He always gives us nice rewards. The other replied, indeed. Our outfit now has a few hundred members. Before them lay people who had just been killed, and it was about to get worse. Seeing the scene, they panicked and cried out, Sir, my hands are out of control, help. Then a horror unfolded. Everyone there suddenly took their own lives. The screams echoed. Nearby, a lone figure stood silently in the shadows. Yusha appeared behind them, saying, I love today's puppet show. Seems there's plenty to report. Yusha appeared behind them, saying, I love today's puppet show. Seems there's plenty to report. Yusha turned and asked, so, do you pity them? Deus replied, because they used others to produce drugs. I just don't know if this ties into my vendetta. She answered, of course it's useful. We're clearing space for his return. Yusha smiled villainously. How could we let this place look shabby when he comes back? Deus, expression-lhes, replied, understood. Then the two activated magic. A roaring wind rose and they vanished, like phantoms hovering in the night. Everything would go according to his will. A flash of light streaked across the brilliant night. Under the calm crescent moon, Yusha's voice rang out, we, Lam Noyet, will be his sword. No one remained there, only a deep pit in the ground. 2 years had passed since becoming pen pals with Yusha. Evan dragged his weary body toward the backyard. I'm back. So you're in the backyard. Alone said nonchalantly, oh my, Evan, you startled me. He gestured and said, the 5th child has been safely sent to the orphanage. Alone was astonished to hear that. In the meantime, the other 3 sins had all been rescued. He handed food to Evan. Here, eat. Yes, thank you, sir. As Alone handed Evan the food, he thought about finding the 3rd child. Greed was a bit tricky, but with a gamer's know-how, after squeezing Evan to the bone, everything finally went smoothly. After giving him the food, he said, you did very well running around. You can rest a bit now. Evan asked, is the orphanage mission over? Alone replied casually, yes, it's done. What a relief. Evan lay down, sighed and asked, but young master, aren't you happy? Of course, Alone answered. He said Evan didn't look it. He pointed to his mouth. I'm smiling now. Then he put on a very professional smile. Let's call it that. Sunlight poured down as he stretched and breathed in. Alone lay on the grass, musing. This is progressing better than I thought. Everything's going smoothly. The masters of the awakened servants all became the 5 great sins after a past tragedy. Although this was set in their past, before they awakened into sin, the chance to perfectly save them all before the tragedy occurred was very slim. Rescuing them after they'd already become sins would be even more worrying. At that, he asked, how's the orphanage? Evan produced the letter. Everything's as usual, everything's going smoothly. Evan continued, the kids who were like broken dolls at first, he said, have brightened up a bit. Alone opened the letter. Really? Then we won't need any more caretakers. He thought, I didn't expect Yusha to do so well. Maybe because her character is tied to the Moon Orphanage. She certainly hates interference. Alone called Evan closer. Seen this way, Yusha is also a good kid. So what's special about her there? In the letter Yusha wrote, everyone's well. Some of the children here are growing very pretty. You really don't need to worry about the applications anymore, nor about the children you just sent. After reading the letter, Alone was genuinely pleased to see them well cared for. He thought if all 5 sins grew up normally, environment truly matters. Evan asked, "So when will you meet the kids? You always say you'll make time for that." Alone stammered, outwardly hesitant. But in truth he had no intention of meeting them directly. Being close would be beneficial in many ways, but perhaps because becoming a sin was so horrific and tragic, their personalities, as seen in the game's flashbacks, were dreadful from childhood. He considered carefully. Since he saved them before awakening, it should be better, but it's still scary. He stammered, "Maybe next year is fine, I understand." Alone sighed in relief. After all, from now on in this horribly dark fantasy world, what he needed was some self-defense skills. He thought magic required talent, and he happened to have it. Evan spoke up, "But young master, have you heard of Lam Noyet?" Alone replied, "Never heard of them." Evan explained, "They're an organization that's become famous recently, specializing in hunting down criminal groups." Alone asked again, "Like trash cleanup? Sounds like a good deed." But inwardly he thought this wasn't the setup he knew, so they'd probably vanish soon. Evan said gravely, "But right now they're even killing nobles. That's why I thought you should know about them." Alone called to him, "Evan, from today you'll sleep next to my room." Night was falling. Moonlight bathed the mansion and voices rose. "Shall we go over Lam Noyet's weekly activity report now?" Yusha nodded and murmured. In the north, Siolang cheerfully reported he'd taken care of everything. He said nonchalantly, "The slave traders' heads have been dealt with. I really like this outfit, Lucky Tailor," he added, and told them if anyone guessed my eye color they'd live. No one did. Ryan chimed in, "All the bodies were buried cleanly." Raiden, sitting on the stair, said, "The South is done too. The illegal human labs and the troublesome Avalon were torn apart, leaving no trace." Yusha smiled wickedly. "Good. Everything is going according to his will. We exist for the glory of the great moon. They all belong to the secret Lam Noyet, worshippers of the great moon." However, a problem had arisen. Yusha said, "Under his directive everything is perfect. So how is there a problem?" Rat Mao reported that Avalon's leader is the Count's eldest son. During the Southern Purge, a dangerous document surfaced. Seems the Count's eldest is plotting against him. This surprised Yusha, though she showed little. What? A demonic power radiated from her. Indeed, even those nearby trembled before it. She held up the paper. After the Count grew weak, he was quietly eliminated with poison. She crushed the paper in anger. "Damn! You're right." 2 years later, as predicted, Count Palacio died. The official cause was announced as cardiac arrest, but given the drug abuse until death, it was obvious. A voice exclaimed, "What? Lam Noyet again?" Alone listened silently. Yes, they assassinated him at night. Another murder then. Alone thought they were becoming more cautious about Lam Noyet. Moreover, the Count's funeral had no mourners. It ended quietly in absolute silence. Everyone left coldly. Evan asked, "Young master, what should we do?" "Next year the commoner, meaning the eldest son, will inherit the title? What's with all this luggage?" Alone was packing. "You pack too." Evan was surprised. "Go? You're leaving the manor." Alone replied, "Not exactly, we're heading south." After arrangements, Evan asked, "South? You mean Rodmill, right?" They planned to move to a small village in the southern part of Palacio's domain, Rodmill. Meanwhile, someone stood on the upper floor watching his every move. Leo had been observing from start to finish but said nothing. The delicious fried egg and toast sizzling in the pan. The two happily fried eggs until everyone drooled. But that cheerful life didn't last long. After 3 days, the pair had to return to the Count's mansion. Alone tore at his hair and groaned. "Now what? Another funeral for the eldest," he said gloomily. "Can't believe I have to go back to this blood-soaked place. The signs of death this time are different. How is he dead?" Alone looked at Leo lying in the coffin. Cause of death: a sword thrust through the heart. Alone wondered, who could do this? Who killed Leo? At that moment, Leo turned and asked about the cause of death. The guards immediately panicked, their hearts leaping in fear. "Sorry for looking at you." Alone was stunned too, not understanding what had come over them. He quietly walked through the crowd. Evan followed, calling, Young master, he asked softly. Evan, have you found anything? Well, about that, young master, could it be? Evan whispered. Are you the one who wiped out Avalon in a single night? Alone, hearing that, turned to look at the servants milling about, only to see their bewildered expressions. A few days earlier, on the trip to Rodmill, Evan spoke up. By the way, young master, if you're leaving too, why not pick a better city? Alone thought to himself. No, absolutely not. Rodmill is the final spot in my plan. He had saved the 5 great sins from their circumstances and prevented the world's future destruction. Rodmill had no ties to the original storyline, and it even had a palatial villa, a perfect place to live comfortably like a noble, to enjoy a sweet, easy life. Alone said in a low voice, There's a reason for everything. Evan immediately interrupted. I'm not getting fooled again. You always shrug things off when you're bothered. Alone clicked his tongue. Fine, let's say that's the case. The carriage rolled out of the Count's mansion. Leo had witnessed it all, wondering in his head whether he should kill him or not. After all, his presence here or not was useless. Leo had considered eliminating him with poison after his father's death, but then thought, since he had quietly moved to the border, there was no longer reason to kill him. Thinking that, he told himself maybe because Avalon's affairs had been messy lately, he was just a nuisance. Leo gripped the railing, still clinging to something. Then he ordered his valet Alman to follow the carriage. Alman, Leo's right-hand man, asked, So you want me to kill him? Leo was taken aback by the question. What? But Alman simply coldly followed orders, not complaining. Suddenly he asked again, which annoyed Leo. Your duty is to obey me. No sooner had he said that than Leo was stabbed once in the chest, his voice shaking. You? How dare you betray me? The other said. I've had my fill of this civil war. But it wasn't Alman. It was Haydn, a member of Lam Noyet, not Alman. Pretty fun so far, we've been taught by the Blood Moon. Lam Noyet is his sword. We act on his will. But if anyone dares harm the Great Moon, we'll take matters into our own hands. Saying that, he plunged the blade deeper into Leo, then decisively pulled the sword out. Blood splattered all over the floor. Watching Leo collapse, he continued, That's why I've been waiting for you to say those words all this time. Didn't expect it'd take 2 years. Keep threatening. My people won't let you walk away safely. With what you just said, Avalon will vanish from the continent forever. He even sounded a bit regretful. What a pity, the Great Moon gave you a chance. Having said that, he leapt over the balcony and disappeared. Dawn began, the sun rose as always, and Rodmill truly looked like paradise. Alone woke cheerfully. Good morning. He gazed at the peaceful day's scenery, eating whenever he wanted and indulging in his favorite dishes. Finally, he could enjoy the true noble life. While eating he thought, maybe I should start a bakery. Evan came in with a letter in hand. Young master, there's a letter for you. Taking it, Alone wondered, what's this? The piece of toast in his hand fell onto the table. The letter said that after Leo's death, Palace Io requests your return, and the free paradise days end after just 3 days. So Alone sadly stood at his brother's funeral and returned to the mansion once more. Looking at the terrified faces before him, he wondered why everyone reacted that way. Evan spoke. Young master, since when did you become the mastermind who wiped out Avalon? Alone was baffled by the question. On reflection, he'd fallen into a recurring simulation, full of crazy situations. Alone curled up in a corner, miserable. Hey, Duong Dung, can you explain to me in terms I understand why I'm the mastermind? Evan said calmly. Because you're the only survivor. Leo was murdered right after we left the mansion, giving you the perfect alibi and making you the heir. Alone went blank hearing that and realized the problem. Evan continued. Avalon disappeared. No one left to complicate Leo's death anymore. And just like that, you became the mastermind with a master swordsman under your command. Happy now? And what's with that outfit? Alone thought, God, when did I start all this? No organization could erase an underworld boss that fast. Alone asked, didn't you say there's an organization that hunts other organizations? You mean Lam Noyet? That's right, but you think that's it, right? Evan said the intelligence network reported that's not the case. They said Lam Noyet doesn't leave bodies, only a mark, whereas Avalon's members were all killed by sword, looking like a scene from hell on earth. That's why I'm seen as the mastermind with a swordsman under me. Indeed, Lam Noyet doesn't appear in the game. No weak group vanishes before the main plot starts. So who is it? Yusha interrogated from her side. Any traces? Yusha probed again. Any traces? Xiaolang also spoke up. Same here, he laughed triumphantly. It's nothing but corpses in there. The door opened. A familiar voice rang out. We're here. Deus's men arrived as well. Avalon's remaining forces numbered 486. Deus spoke exactly as the boss wanted. He grinned. We split them in two. Yusha, hearing the report, was extremely pleased. Perfect. And so, Avalon, the massive organization that once dominated the kingdom of Asteria, turned to dust in just 5 days. Deus interjected. However, it seems the cleanup isn't finished. What do you mean? He held up a stack of documents. I found more nobles tied to Avalon. The Duchy of Altia seems deeply involved. Upon hearing this, Yusha fell silent for a moment. She opened the file Deus had given her, radiating her usual menace. You know what I'm about to say, don't you? Everyone understood her implication. No one said anything more. Deus said, let's handle them quietly. Yusha exhaled, then turned to Ryan. The Intelligence Council has confirmed everything, right? Ryan held the paper. Yes, they're treating this as unrelated to Lam Noyet. Deus added, other guilds say the same. They call it a swordsman's hell. Yusha asked, do we continue to monitor? She smiled faintly. Keep watching, and absolutely do not touch that person. I've said it countless times. Everyone knows. He made the papers float. But since that person's bloodline already targeted it first, this case isn't a direct order. Remember, we are a sword. Hearing that, Yusha brightened, hit her face and said, a sword mustn't think for itself, right? Her eyes flashed red. Facing the window, she said, Lam Noyet must act on command. Remember, this person knows everything. The four across from them tensed and looked up. Her voice was resolute. Never fail that person. Deus looked at Yusha, puzzled. I don't get it. Someone as superior as you getting anxious just from being exposed? Then he raised the stack of papers and said, I get it now. It's all for the great moon, for that person. Meanwhile, at the Count's mansion, lights were still on inside. Alone sat at his desk, moaning, I can't take this anymore. He looked up, tears streaming. After the funeral, he'd been busy nonstop for a month. Alone complained, I just want to relax and live off money. That's what nobles should do. He bowed his head thinking, although I've made many enemies, Leo's death should have happened 6 years later. But because of his death, the game's timeline shifted, and all family duties fell on me. At that moment, the heir suddenly heard a call. Young Count, the elders are entering immediately. Each held a pile of items in their hands, books or scrolls. Seeing this, he sighed deeper. Dark circles showed under Alone's eyes. He wondered why everyone was working so hard. When the Count was alive, they were leisurely and cut corners. From afar, the elders saw his gloomy face and waved in panic. Is he angry? We must work harder, we don't want to die. His complexion grew paler from overwork. The vassals were surely working seriously because of rumors he was the mastermind. I told you to come. Why didn't you? Now Alone was a small corporate slave working silently. He secretly wished they'd handle everything themselves. Scene change. Flames flare up and slowly roast the food. Evan asked the young master, puzzled, looking up. I really am surprised. Alone was at that moment manipulating magic to float around the room. Evan continued, to reach rank 2 in just 2 years of self-study, your talent is remarkable. When did you develop like this? Normally it takes about 4 years to hit rank 2 and you can't even use spells, unless you're born with bamboo blessing. Calmly he replied, maybe I have some talent. I worried, so I trained hard to protect myself. Alone thought to himself that this technique also requires very precise mana control. He kept the spells circling non-stop, yet the important thing was that they were still incomplete. His face showed fatigue. He'd never imagined he'd actually use magic in a fantasy world. He murmured, "At first I was excited, thinking once the plan was done there'd be no more danger, so I'd slow my studies. Then the magic orb rose, but recently survival became a real issue." He realized a heartbreaking truth that brought tears to his eyes. His mana well is tiny. Alone complained that nothing was effective. At that point, he recalled the info about it. The mana well you're born with is like an athlete's physique, fixed from birth, and his mana well was a bit. Thinking about it made him ache with pain. He realized the truth. It was so small that training wouldn't help. Sitting and eating, he thought, if all else failed, there was one other way. At that moment, Evan picked up the letter and said, "Oh right." An invitation to a dance arrived for the young master. Hearing that, he turned to look toward the dance. Just then the ball had arrived, held at a lavish mansion. Around them the nobles had all gathered. Dressed in his count's attire, he entered with Evan. Upon entering he sighed, "Phew, I'm already tired." It was just an ordinary gala for networking among nobles, held in the southern region of the Kingdom of Asteria. Since he's about to become a count soon, it might be wise to use this chance to build some connections. Alone adjusted the scarf at his neck and walked in. Evan behind him munched a load of food and asked, "What are you doing?" He thought to himself that mingling with nobles was important for his peaceful future. But as Alone approached, everyone around him was terrified and hurriedly avoided him. Then he reached out to greet a nearby man, who immediately panicked, and the whole crowd scattered as if chased by a ghost. Evan beside him couldn't help but laugh and reassure, "Don't be dramatic. Ha ha. Don't be sad." He watched and thought, "Sad? Not really, I expected this." So he said, "Evan, I'm heading back." With that he turned and left. "I know I'll be ignored because my dignity isn't like the glorious ancestors. Now I'm just the black sheep of the East." But he didn't come unprepared. Alone lifted his wine glass, thinking he'd handle the situation with the social skills he'd secretly practiced. He said, "This wine has a distinctive taste." A nearby girl turned, but her face went pale with fear. He added in a low voice, "Especially, the aroma seems different." Alone smiled faintly, looking like a demon. "I want to drink a few bottles at home." Inwardly he thought the smile was gentle, the sort needed for socializing. The girl saw his face and went white, trembling, then fled in panic. "I'll talk to my father and prepare immediately." Alone watched, bewildered, thinking, "Wait, not." People behind were whispering about Alone. They said he threatened her for a limited edition bottle, worse than his brothers. What a rogue. Evan beside him patted his shoulder, suppressing a laugh. He still tried to deny reality. "She must be just shy." Then they left. Evan said, "Your haul just increased again." He munched happily while rattling off an impressive list. A fine horse from Paldeon, Fenian orange tea, metal forged by Valanda, specialty wine from Malatino. Quite a lineup. Meanwhile, the protagonist brooded, realizing the name Palacio has worse connotations than he thought. Rumor had it he'd killed his rogue brothers. He seemed to be someone everyone avoided. So much for socializing. Maybe it's just me or I've grown more distant. He said wearily, "I'll go get some fresh air." Evan stood still and said, "Yes." At the back, a red-haired girl watched him silently. She looked at him as if lost in thought, then stepped outside and leaned on the railing to gaze around. He kept wondering, where did it all go wrong? Just then a voice called, "Hello? May I have a word with you?" Alone startled and turned. "Someone spoke to me? Who is it?" But when he turned, there was no one in sight. Then suddenly a voice rang out again. He looked down in surprise and a petite girl stood before him. She introduced herself, Loria, the third daughter of Duke Altia. He heard the name and thought quietly, Altia, of course. Alone said, "Yes, hello." The Altia house is one of the 3 notorious villains of sudden fame, the black sheep of the north. Alone thought to himself that anyone who approaches him proactively must be up to something. He looked at the girl and wondered, why don't I remember her? He didn't recall seeing her in the game. Loria suddenly said, "I'll be blunt, lend me your power." At that, Alone's expression before her turned frighteningly dark. Loria, flustered, continued, "I'll be assassinated soon." Her words echoed into the night, oddly gentle. Loria's face was full of terror as she looked up. Alone heard it and thought to himself he'd received his father's favor, and until now had been protected like a spare child. Duke Altia had fallen gravely ill. She panicked. But now? Altia hesitated and added, my half-sisters are about to kill me. He wondered, so it's all just a survival fight? Alone looked down and realized. No wonder he didn't remember her, because she had died when the game began. Loria pleaded urgently, if it's your power, Alone, please, but he answered, I refuse. Loria tried to continue. I'm not asking you to help me for free. If you help me, I'll give you half of House Altia. Yet he turned and said, then I'll excuse myself. Alone thought inwardly that though pitiful, just staying alive was hard enough. He shouldn't invite more trouble. Even if he wanted to help, it wouldn't be as rumored. He had no special abilities. Alone couldn't help but look back at the lone figure standing there. Loria's face was sad and silent. He rubbed his neck, exhaled, then turned back, thinking, something good is about to happen for her, hoping she'll find a decent ally. Then he slipped back into the party, where two men in black cloaks were talking in the corner. So Altia's moved closer to the great moon? I should let Red Moon know something good is coming for that one. The woman beside him replied, you needn't. If the intel's right, she's the only Altia not tied to Avalon. Those above are watching Logia, meaning she's not on Raiden's target list. The other turned away. That's fine then. The other Altias will be dealt with. Yes, by Red Moon's orders. We'll cut communication channels so the Avalon incident never reaches him. They above silently watched Alone below. At the party he thought to himself, everything feels oddly empty. Am I surrounded by some sort of barrier? Unaware, Alone noticed a mysterious girl nearby. She said, hello. Hearing someone speak, Alone was moved. Was that for me? Really? Could I actually make friends with nobles this time? He turned and said, yes, hello. The girl hid a smile behind a fan. Seeing that, he immediately thought, again? Another shady one? I saw this face in the game. As he looked at her, he thought, anyone who starts a conversation with me first surely isn't a regular noble. Recognizing her, he stepped forward. Hello, Miss Zenonia. Kalia. Surprised he knew her, blurted, oh my, you know me? He replied calmly, of course, you're quite famous. The three most notorious villain clans in the kingdom of Asteria. To the north is House Altia, to the east is House Palatio, and finally, to the west is the Den of Debauchery. She gives off the air of a noble serpent. Kalia smiled faintly. Famous? Me? She is the eldest daughter of Count Zenonia. Count Zenonia. If Palatio is a crime gang, Zenonia is the upscale, legalized version, thinking that made Alone shiver. I only need a few noble contacts to stay safe, he vowed. Even with half my life hanging by a thread. For this sweet life, I mustn't get tangled with them. Someone teased because Kalia was so beautiful. She replied gently, thank you for the compliment. Kalia smiled and added, I'd love to talk more. What do you think? Alone answered calmly, I would too, but too many eyes are watching. Inwardly he begged, please let me leave quietly. Kalia looked at him and said something cryptic, just as the rumors suggested. Then she turned away. I hope to see you again soon. The words sounded puzzling. Kalia then walked off elsewhere. He stood there confused, not understanding what had just happened. Above, two watchers peering down said, Avalon District is completely sealed. The other added, but now a new player has appeared. They looked toward the window where someone hiding in a tree still watched. A tail? Huh? Then two slight figures darted off. Without direct orders, they only observed for now and would act later if needed. Scene change. Evan scratched his head in confusion. Young master, are you sure this time is for real? They stood before a ravine. Evan doubted. Is this really the place we've been hunting for all this time? He peered inside. Though it was midday, the place was oddly dark. Everyone's faces taut as if about to ascend. He clenched his fist, finally found it. My true target, the environmental effects match, it's definitely here. Evan groaned. If this turns out fake again, I'll go into depression. They stepped in, scanning around. Rune lines covered the stones, he replied. This one's legit. In the game this place was much easier to find. Actually, the reason he trekked out here under the guise of a recon mission was because of the Southern Labyrinth. That maze is called the Whispering Labyrinth. Solve all the puzzles in its 8 chambers, and you'll receive a precious relic as a reward. Alone smiled and looked ahead. I still remember all the guides and that blissful grind for loot feeling. Before them stood a massive gate, inscribed with strange characters. He looked up in awe, seeing the labyrinth entrance in real life. Though he'd once been fed up with this place in the game, standing before it felt entirely different. Evan exclaimed, "This ravine looks like someone carved it by hand. How do you even know places like this?" Alone looked up and said, "I've been here many times." Evan blinked. "You've been here many times?" Alone grinned. "Just kidding. I have my own ways. Come on." Seeing that serious face, Evan cried, "Please don't say things like that with such a solemn look." No sooner had they entered than the roar of a monster sounded above. His massive hands clapped together, producing a terrifying boom. Evan looked around and muttered, "In a place like this, get one puzzle wrong and you're crushed. No refunds." Alone silently assessed as the horrific sounds continued. Evan stared, stunned at his master's emotionless face as he scratched something onto a stone tablet. How could he be so calm? He watched intently as Alone took notes, still baffled even in this situation. Evan recalled 4 years together and still couldn't figure his young master out. No 2 missions were alike. Repaying someone else's debt, helping a slave save an orphan, dismantling a demonic cult, delivering a pointless letter. Now the monster seemed not yet finished, which puzzled him more. How did the young master know this place inside out without ever leaving home? Alone calmly pointed to the beast. "The puzzle's been solved, but it hasn't opened. The other thing has to finish first." The noises kept echoing. Evan continued mulling it over. Still, following this mysterious young master always led to good things. They both looked over. He said, "Oh, it's opening." He thought inwardly, "What are you planning this time, young master?" Deep inside, Alone silently cheered. The door finally opened. "Oh gods, I'm about to puke." Knew it was tough, but not this brutal. Evan nearly broke his neck trying not to look, and before them lay a heap of glittering jewels that lit up the whole chamber. Evan cried out, "Finally done, right?" Alone replied calmly, "Yeah. Grab the black ring and let's go." In the distance 6 rings were mounted on a fake hand. Evan said, "That thing looks utterly useless." Alone picked up the black ring. "It's a bit big, but touching the others would only invite trouble. Leave them be." He silently stared at the ring, thinking to himself, "Finally got a shackle ring." Alone reassured him again, "Don't worry. The way back is safe." Evan stammered, "Yes." Walking, he thought that remembering the game guide made this too easy, yet his expression wasn't great. "Young master, did you plan all this ahead?" Before them stood a cluster of giant golems, so the bronze rock in that ravine was actually golems. Evan worriedly calculated, "Anonymous enemies, wonderful. At least we need some way to get you out of here, sir." Alone stepped forward and said, "I'll handle this one." Evan looked bewildered. Just then the monsters all turned toward them. Evan warned, "Whatever you're planning, priority 1 is getting out of here." A golem lunged to attack. He shouted, "Wait! A tier 2 spell won't cut it." At that moment Alone murmured, "Binding, activate." The ring on his hand flashed black. Immediately the golems began to change, light flickering across them. A voice rang out in the void. "Fragment, inheritor of Marlala's great will. Speak 2 limits you can accept to grow." Alone stood in the pitch-black space, looking around. In the game a choice window would pop up now, so that voice was it. A colossal face appeared in the darkness. The reward for conquering the binding labyrinth. True to its name, it was a siphoning relic granting power to the user, but in exchange imposed strict bindings. Alone trembled slightly, tense. The voice sounded so real, like he was truly inside that world. He spoke the first limit and the voice asked the next question. Alone formed a hand seal and answered, "In all operations, the sigils of Babylonia are absolutely mandatory." The voice asked, "What do you hope to gain from this binding?" He replied, The power to bend the world's rules a little more. Lines of power in the air intertwined and merged. Evan looked up at the pitch-black scene. Light slowly emerged and the voice asked again. The second limit? Alone formed another seal. In all operations only the sacred tongue of Babylonia may be used. The voice asked, and what do you wish from this binding? He calmly answered, the same as before. The voice was silent for a moment. Alone looked up, puzzled. Damn it. Did I miss a step? The skill icon copied it exactly too, selecting both the seals and the sacred tongue as limits to gain the strongest defensive power. He couldn't help sweating nervously. I'd mastered the seals and chants from playing it countless times. This had to work. Then the voice accepted. The vague tone intoned, human. Remember the seals and runes of the great forgotten god. We give thanks to the one who continues his will. Alone heard this and wondered, continue his will? What does that mean? Right after, the ring on his hand vanished. He guessed it was being absorbed into him. Seems the binding succeeded. The voice spoke one last time. I have always watched you. You inherit that will. Back in reality, Evan was still shouting, young master, tier 2 spell. Before him were the massive monsters. He reached out anxiously, but it wasn't enough. Alone looked up calmly, eyes utterly serene, his hand beginning to channel magic. The iron orb that should have blazed brilliantly instead flickered weakly, though he'd poured all his mana into it. No matter how much he trained, he still couldn't surpass the limit. So it was time to test the power of the bindings and the price to pay for them. With that train of thought, the protagonist conjured a magic orb in the palm of his hand. The orb continued to swell little by little. The monsters lunged forward. Alone raised his hand and guided the magic orb straight ahead. Time to test it. Alone immediately brought out the magic sphere. Next came the reverberation spell. Sparks of lightning striking the cave's ley lines one after another. The orb grew ever brighter, bursting in the dim, muffled space. With a blue light technique, the orb expanded and spun, firing continuous arcs of lightning all around. And finally, the linear diffraction maneuver. Alone expertly twisted his hands through the casting motions. A powerful bolt of electricity shot from his palm. The current surged straight into the pursuing stone giants. Evan watched the scene dumbfounded, eyes wide in astonishment. Evan watched the scene dumbfounded, eyes wide in astonishment. The electricity hadn't fully faded. The giant stone beings were struck motionless, drained of strength. Alone and Evan stood on the cliff, silently observing. After a few seconds of quiet, another burst of lightning swept through, cleansing the remaining stone giants. They fell apart limb by limb, shattering, the bolts flickering then fading. Looking down, the two saw the giants reduced to heaps of ruined rock. Alone's face showed no change, while Evan was still dazed, barely recovered, muttering, "Damn it! Unbelievable." They waited for the electricity under the cliff to die out before descending together. All the way, Evan nagged Alone. "Have you been hiding your true power this whole time?"
Alon repli de coulis. Impossible.
Evan wouldn't believe it and pushed. "What do you mean? In 15 years as a mercenary, I've never seen anything like that. Are you seriously saying that's only a level 2 spell?" But all he got back was the bland 2 words. "Yes, that's right," from Alone, leaving him speechless and helpless. Contrary to Alone's cold, emotionless face, inside he was full of turmoil. "I didn't expect it either. It wasn't this strong in the game. If I remember correctly, in Psyche Deliria's turn-based combat system, magic can be enhanced by sigils or mantras each turn. In a turn-based system, each victory and completed battle grants the character a 10% attack boost. And from the recent fight with the stone giants, this time it was a chain judgment spell using 4 sigils and incantations. It was amplified over 5 turns. The more he thought, the more Alone subconsciously replayed the spells he'd used. He'd cast 4 techniques in total. The accumulated bolts of lightning were simultaneously amplified into a configuration suited for a wide-area judgment spell. In return, the drawback was having to use sigils and incantations for each spell, but the payoff was exceptional power. Thinking this, Alone vaguely heard a strange voice echo in his head. "O forgotten mortal, you who still remember the sigils and the mysteries of the great god. I thank you for inheriting his will." Having thought that, he concluded, That's probably why the magic was amplified many times over. All the way out, Alone's mind buzzed with thoughts. Even so, this level 2 magic's power is overkill, far beyond expectation, even surprising me. Evan walked behind, finally exhaling, sighing. We made it out at last. He sat down wearily on a stone bench, leaning against the cliff, grumbling. This was more exhausting than the fight itself. In a weary tone that was part scold and part question, Evan asked Alone, "Who in their right mind came up with a place this awful?" Alone didn't answer. He glanced around and fell back into thought. Come to think of it, the Whispering Labyrinth had another name. From information found online, it spread through the community via shared maps and guidebooks, and the buzz about this maze on social media was huge. What is Paleon Maze anyway? Everyone keeps saying Paleon, Paleon. What the heck is that? Whispering Labyrinth. A mid-level leveling area in the game. According to the director, the maze has an owner and can be endlessly grinded if you skip the rewards. So when did it start being called Paleon's Maze? This question nagged at Alone until he blurted it out. When did it start being called Paleon's Maze? Evan, half listening and not following, asked, "Sorry, what did you say?" Alone didn't repeat himself. He hauled Evan up and deflected. "Let's head east. After 3 weeks of hard training, there's something I want to do when we get back." Evan sighed helplessly. "What? You're more dedicated than I thought." As he tugged Evan away, Alone thought, choosing sigils of the same affinity as the spell increases power, and picking the right mantra amplifies the trait. That's how the game works. But unlike the game, where visuals stay the same and only attack stats rise, each victory actually grants the player an extra 10% attack power. Yet in the recent battle, Alone noticed each sigil altered the magic, and every incantation produced a distinct change. Thinking that, Alone wondered, even though it was just spell technique, could my mana control be refined enough to sense those shifts? Shaking off the tangled thoughts, Alone finally told himself, once my mana recovers, I need to test it again. Anyway, everything turned out fine. In the dark of the deep woods, unbeknownst to Alone and Evan, Rhine wrapped in a cloak lurked hidden in the shadows. Once they left, she lifted her head, then nimbly leapt from cliff to cliff and entered the labyrinth. Arriving, Rhine paused and stared at another huge stone slab covered in raised-colored script. After all, everything turned out fine, and recognizing these strange characters at once, she realized, this is the script of the Alanef Empire. Rhine removed her hood and cloak and translated the odd inscription. It read, "For a friend about to be left alone, the Sword Saint band stood firm." Then she lightly touched the raised-colored glyphs. Vivid images flashed through Rhine's mind. He had repelled the Dark Prince's invasion and defeated Al-Akalaka, who had devoured the hearts of his people. The glorious emperor, Great Banon, lived on in the people's hearts, bravely wielding the divine sword to battle a savage giant dragon. Then the reel fast-forwarded to Rhine herself hovering above, surrounded by flying books, a voice echoing in her head constantly reminding her, "I know all, for I was born with a great mission in the ancient library." Back in the present, Rhine recalled standing on the cliff looking down at Alone and seemed to realize something. Yes, Palatio was the one who created it. I knew the Empress was different from the one in the records, so I guess something extraordinary. Images of Empress Boludia, Emperor Great Ban Alone, and Alone kept circling in Rhine's head. Yet she couldn't stop the stream of thoughts in her mind. Think about it. Even the mighty moon once called Palatio a friend worthy of reverence. Moreover, the mantra he whispered doesn't exist in any record of the ancient library. Recalling Alone's recent fight with the giants, the incantations he used troubled Rhine the most. She was intensely curious. Who exactly is that man? When leaving the labyrinth, Rhine felt a little shy and muttered, "Everything Hong Gwyn said was true. I'm ashamed that I blindly followed orders." Her expression immediately cooled back to its usual icy blankness as she asked, half stating, "Have you arrived?" She looked up at the figure on the branch and asked, curious, "Did you get the information?" Deus touched coldly and answered, "The man in the black coat is dead." His neck was suddenly twisted twice in midair, and that was Alone's handiwork. Rhine, upon hearing this, curtly said, "I'll report this so it can be dealt with properly." In the dead of night, a pale moon hung over the treetops, and two silhouettes shot through the sky. Meanwhile, at the Zenonia Count's manor, inside a room, Kalia sat on the sofa, took a sip of tea, and said with a lazily detached look, "So it's more than just a rumor." Kalia fell into thought, unconsciously musing about Alone and thinking. His gaze is so cold and emotionless, like a bottomless abyss. She sneered inwardly. Famous, is he? She leaned back in the chair and answered herself. Indeed, Count Zenonia is both powerful and renowned. Kalia's eyes darkened as she remarked, "It's strange that someone so reclusive as you is considered famous." Saying that, Kalia rose and slowly walked toward the man at the desk, smiling. "Isn't it odd, father?" The man paused his pen at her call and turned to look. He watched seriously as she continued, "Because you are the Count, after all." Kalia drew closer and offered a faint, icy smile. Then she snapped her fingers. In the man's eyes, Kalia's image began to twitch and blur. He collapsed weakly, the brush in his hand dropping limp. Seeing this, Kalia was thoroughly pleased, grinning wickedly and taunting. "No one would suspect that I'm the one actually running the whole house while father plays the fool. How could they possibly find out?" She recalled at the banquet Alone had no idea the watcher in the distance was planted by her, and he even kindly warned her that many eyes were watching. Kalia thought with glee, "Even my planted spy seems to have been uncovered." At that moment, a guard burst in, calling urgently, "Miss Kalia." She leaned against the wall, hands on hips. "What's the matter?" The guard immediately reported, "Miss, please return to your room at once." Kalia followed the guard back to her chamber and, opening the door, found the spy smeared in blood, slumped against the wall. The guard carefully informed her, "It seems the seal wasn't activated, meaning he hasn't revealed the secret." Kalia said sternly, "He deliberately placed it in my room." She then paused, leaving the sentence hanging. A few seconds later Kalia laughed and mocked herself. How could they have discovered this? From the first meeting, haven't they hit me right at my biggest weakness? Her face contorted ugly with anger. Meanwhile, Evan and Alone were dozing in the carriage on the way back. Evan's snoring was so loud that Alone woke groggily, wiggled his ear, then drifted back to sleep. Cut to evening at the Altia ducal domain. Loria sat in the carriage, heart filled with dread, thinking, certainly not an ordinary person. She recalled underworld figures with eyes as cold as her father's. These were people you absolutely shouldn't confront. Loria sadly remembered how Alone had turned away coldly. "He is my last lifeline." She was full of disappointment but thought, he might not have accepted such a losing deal after all. Loria recalled her siblings who had been stripped of all wealth and power by the most ruthless brothers. Tim Allen, the eldest son, Maul and the eldest daughter, Perrine the younger daughter, and Kig the younger son. Looking at herself, she thought, because I have nothing left. Loria stared at the lavish building that felt both familiar and strange and thought, up to now I've survived only by my father's pity and love. What am I supposed to do now? Anyway, I have to step into that cold mansion. Suddenly, a loud call rang out. "Miss Loria, the youngest miss has returned." Two maids ran over from afar, alarmed as they reported, Miss Perrine and young Master Kig are dead." At the news, Loria's face changed. What? Images of those two popped into her head. People ready to stab even their own family. Them doing it themselves? Impossible, Loria murmured. What about Tim Allen and Maul? Immediately, a pitiful cry rang out. The servants rushed toward the sound and were horrified to find the two of them stabbing at each other with swords. Chaos erupted. Loria stood frozen and wondered, what is going on? They didn't know that on the roof a small figure had vanished like lightning, smiling coldly, finished the job and leapt away, disappearing from sight. The servants fled in panic, and Loria muttered, her terrified face recalling Alone's strange remark. There will be something good. Alone's expression then was terrifying, hiding and waiting for the right moment, tucking away his claws to seize the prize. The true power behind the Count's family has arrived. She trembled with fear. Is that what you mean? Like him, I too became the sole heir of the ducal house overnight. After a moment, Loria exhaled. She thought, I don't even know what ridiculous pact I've signed, but there's no turning back now. Loria immediately turned and decided, What would happen if I betrayed him? There have been too many precedents. I have no choice but to keep walking the path I've chosen. Time jumps to 2 months later. At Alone's mansion, a man entered respectfully. I come by order of Duke Altea. Alone was shocked. Duke Altea? Evan beside him peered curiously and exclaimed when he saw an extremely rare bottle of wine. They say each bottle is worth thousands of gold. Unexpected to see it in person. A letter was included beside it. Alone was astonished. To Loria Altea? Not the Duke but Loria, the youngest, prepared this? Why send it to me while I'm struggling out here? He asked the man. Was it really sent to me? The man bowed and replied. Yes. The Duke personally prepared it and ordered me to deliver it by hand. Hearing this, Alone flinched. The Duke himself? Wait, so Loria, the youngest, has, unbeknownst even to you, become Duke Altea? At that moment, she was focused on paperwork at her desk. After a while, Loria stretched. 2 months flew by so fast. She couldn't help recalling that after her father's funeral, the one who died of illness, she had held the succession ceremony and become the Duke. Loria stood and sighed. At first I couldn't even step into this office. She still couldn't forget that horrific night. Even though her siblings died suddenly, she still avoided suspicion thanks to an alibi, the ball. At that time, even her secret organization had been wiped out by her siblings. So when she returned to the manor, that should have been the moment she was in the most danger. Loria couldn't help feeling flustered and terrified. By the time she realized, it was too late. She reeled, thinking, he exploited the whole situation? She pictured the scene again. Outwardly he refused coldly, yet afterward he handled everything perfectly. Remembering it, Loria remained bewildered. How many moves ahead was he thinking? I didn't even notify anyone about the funeral for fear of causing trouble. So she wandered alone through the splendid manor. Clearly he needed Altea for some plan, which is why he sought me out. Walking, Loria thought. Even though I've consolidated the organizations under Altea, it still can't compare to the hidden power he's keeping. I suspect he wants something else from me. Alone's image flashed in her mind. An underworld boss building influence through business alone. If it's something he lacks but I possess, his image only grew darker. Alone's image in her head. An underworld boss building influence through business alone. If it's something he lacks but I have. His figure seemed to darken further. Manipulating politics from the shadows, Altea's reputation, perhaps? Loria looked up at the portrait on the wall. For now, I must focus on what needs to be done. She turned back, standing before the Duke's portrait, thinking, my benefactor will contact me soon. Loria gave a small, sly smile. I hope this thank you gift pleases you. On the other side, the man bowed and left the Duke's room. I shall take my leave then. Alone was still puzzled. Loria had been threatened with murder, yet now she's become Duke? How does that make sense? Something's off. Evan tilted his head curiously too. The whole thing was bizarre. Time shifts to a few months later, in winter, 5 years before the rules began. As Alone was walking, someone suddenly called, Young Master. Evan ran over and asked, Young Master, no, now your account, right? He replied, although the succession ceremony hasn't happened yet, the new year has come, so the title will do for now. Inside, Alone felt annoyed. My life's grand plan never included becoming a count. It was Sai Seidel's glorious creed: conquer Jayat Emin, avoid succession fights, and take an American-style road trip. Still, things became familiar, and he enjoyed the perks of nobility to the fullest. Actually better than he'd thought. Evan then handed over a letter. This is a letter from Yusha. As he entered the room, Alone asked, by the way, any news on Leo's assassins? The man answered, nothing clear yet. The Information Guild is investigating thoroughly. We'll wait and see. They then sat at the table, and Evan asked, so what is your purpose? Not for revenge, I hope? He thought. The changes from the game are all butterfly effects caused by me. Alone said, just to guard against unexpected situations. Evan suddenly laughed. You looked very count-like just now. Hearing that, he sighed. Let's say that's true. Alone looked at the letter, curious. I wonder what's inside this time. At that moment, the letter read, how are you? We're all well as usual. Everyone is indulging in their own hobbies. Especially, Deuce's puppet show has reached a truly high level. Over there, they're also very cheerful. Xiaolang is engrossed in gaming with friends. And the others, Ryan has been quietly reading lately but often inventing things. Raiden has taken a liking to landscape design. After finishing the letter, Alone smiled gently. The everyday life at the orphanage, used to monthly letters, warmed him more and more. Though he'd never met them, seeing the kids grow thanks to his support made him grin like a proper dad. Then he suddenly asked Evan, by the way, the 5, no, those kids, how old are they now? Evan, curious, asked back, why do you ask, sir? He then answered, it's almost time they go out into society. Some left the orphanage earlier. Most of the people you personally ordered retrieved are around that age. Hearing that, Alone's innocent image of them seemed to crack a little. He couldn't help picturing the kids thanking him. Thank you for raising us, sir. With regards from the 5 elders. Alone thought immediately. Right, that makes sense, it's time to let them out bit by bit. Evan asked again. Really? Weren't you deliberately gathering these weak kids? Alone replied calmly. There's no reason. They're grown now, time to think of their futures. But inside he thought differently. We've kept them from awakening into villainy, so they should be able to fend for themselves, right? Evan, hearing this, exclaimed. Looks like they're all doing fine now. I see. Alone began to consider. In each boss fight, the narration hinted at their abilities. Yusha has a talent for faith. Next is that gloomy boy, Deus, talented in swordsmanship. Then Ryan, talented in research. Then the beast child Xiaolang with combat talent. And finally Raiden with the apostle ability. Alone suddenly lifted a box. If he positioned them correctly, wouldn't they be capable of holding key posts? He thought of the kids and mused. Since it's done, giving each a gift they'd like wouldn't hurt. After all, I did promise gifts once. A while later, the scene shifted to late afternoon. Sunset light poured over the mansion. Alone sat at his desk, stretched, and breathed. That's everything. Evan, still with drool at his lip, ran off saying, well then, I'm off. Alone watched him go, thinking, if things go smoothly, will I get even a tiny share of the benefits? At that moment, little birds flew peacefully across the sky. Children, take this letter and step into the wider world. Cut to the children Alone mentioned. His instruction felt like an order. Yusha kept a cold face but flushed reading the letter. This time, the directive was sent individually. All 5 were holding their letters. Deus maintained a cold expression, calmly reading. Xiaolang jumped about with joy at receiving his. Ryan smiled softly, and Raiden said nothing, while Yusha lowered his eyes staring at the letter, unreadable. In the room everyone gathered, focused on the sheets in their hands. The orders had arrived. However, this time he had sent them individually to each of us. Xiaolang grabbed his paper and leaped up in glee, cheering. Raiden and Ryan held their letters but remained pensive and silent. Yusha, holding several letters, said calmly, but before doing anything, we should reread the previous letters. His orders require a very high level. Xiaolang, excited, said, can we actually read them? Before only you could read them. Yusha remained calm. The fact he sent separate orders means he decided it's time for everyone to know. The letter opened, and Yusha began to read. How have you been lately? Seems you've made a lot of talented friends. Huh? If you need anything, tell me. Xiaolang read the letter, scratched his cheek, puzzled. Is this an order? Ryan read it too and found it odd, more like small talk. Yusha scoffed when she heard them. Exactly. He disguised the order as casual conversation from the start. All right, look, she analyzed the letter for the group. This is the first order after the greeting. The letter says, Yusha, how are you? I'm fine. Today my older brother used me as a chair. Funny, right? Occasionally I want to send you letters. Reply if you're okay. And the child I sent this time, Yusha explained. He designates targets to be eliminated per the mission and wants us to report back afterward. The letter continued. Thank you for replying. I hope you can tell me what happens at the orphanage each month. I entrust that place to you. You'll be fine together. Yusha continued. This is when he entrusts Lam Noyet to me. As you can see, he personally chose each of you. Everyone around suddenly gaped in astonishment. Deus, hearing Yusha, seemed to understand. I get it. It's to prevent information leaks, right? I remember my first order. She laughed and added. Like this, you must understand the order clearly and carry out the mission. Deus suggested. Then why don't we meet him directly, or use magical communication devices? Wouldn't that be better? Raiden agreed. He's got a point. If it's about leaks, why use letters? Yusha's expression suddenly changed. Her face darkened, red eyes flashing coldly. I hope you haven't forgotten that all we must do is follow orders. Deus fell silent at Yusha's unwavering loyalty, feeling a steady trust that sent chills down his spine. I haven't forgotten. Suddenly Siolang raised his paper high and shouted excitedly. Then let's read our orders together. In the lamplit room, everyone formed a circle and read the orders sent individually to each of them. Deus read his mission. He told me to go to Caliban, the kingdom of knights. Siolang sighed in disappointment. The colony continent? But I don't like deserts. Raiden continued. I'm assigned to Raxus, the entertainment city. Rhine was sent elsewhere. He told me to go to Larthania, the labyrinth city. Yusha's eyes grew dreamy as she clutched her order with passion. Holy Nation, Rosario. Everything we need to do is written in the letter, right? Deus held his order, voice flat. I don't know the reason, but he told me to become a knight. Siolang cheered. He also said not to worry. Sponsorship will continue. Rhine smiled and added. He also let us know where the gifts are. Raiden seemed pleased. Whatever it is, we'll find out when we get there. Yusha warned. But remember, unless he says so first, you must never mention the name Lam Noyet. Her gaze turned cold and sharp. The group quickly obeyed the order, donning black cloaks, and left the mansion. 3 months later, in a room stacked with books, Alone was reading. Sure enough, nothing mentioned changes in magic or mantras. I'll have to experiment myself. He turned to Evan and asked, any progress on gathering info about who killed Leo? Evan replied, the Intelligence Guild says they still haven't found anything. Alone felt a bit disappointed. Is that so? He propped his chin on his hand, thinking, seems the butterfly effects have spiraled beyond my control. This is the result of saving the 5 big offenders. Alone remembered the cold Duchess Loria. In fact, Loria, who was supposed to die in the plot, has become Duchess Altia, expanding power and underworld influence at an astonishing rate. The more he thought, the darker Alone's face grew. He set the book down and ordered Evan. Stop the assassin investigation. Evan was stunned. Huh? Really? Alone thought to himself. This is clearly one of those times when ignorance is bliss. In the setting, almost nothing slips past the Intelligence Guild's network. But if you pry into things you shouldn't, the more he thought, the more terrified he became, his face going pale. If overcaution leads to death, then all precautions become pointless. To protect himself, Alone had no choice. After all, secret organizations like that won't harm you as long as you don't meddle in their business. There's no reason for them to attack unless you approach them first. Alone told Evan. At this rate, continuing is pointless. Though he didn't fully understand Alone's motives, Evan agreed. All right. I'll tell them to stop the investigation. Suddenly, Evan remembered another piece of news and hurried to tell Alone. Oh right, one more thing. It seems Deus was recently knighted in Caliban. Hearing that, though expressionless, Alone still politely congratulated him. Really? Good for him. 3 months later, Evan burst in with a pile of food. Baron, how do you like multi-talented Evan? Then whispered to praise himself. Quite the talent. Huh. He then told Alone another bit. Not has now even formed a whole knight squad. Alone was stunned. What? Then he must be at least at expert level or higher. Alone recalled the knight ranks in this world. Sword master, sword expert, swordsman. The more he thought, the more amazed he was. It's not been that long since he was first knighted. Has it? Evan added. People are saying the world will see the 5th great knight in under 10 years. Alone suddenly recalled and asked about the great knights. You mean those called Caliban's blades? Evan confirmed. Yes, he's truly talented. Alone felt a bit proud. I'm quite proud of him. Evan, chewing, said. Caliban must be buzzing about this. 6 months later, in a magnificent castle, alone was hard at work. It had been a year since the five left the orphanage. Just as he was getting used to his duties as Baron, Evan came in with news. Baron, I just heard something very new. Alone didn't stop his work. Evan continued. It seems Deus has become one of Caliban's blades. The next bit of news made Alone so shocked he dropped his pen. He's become the fifth great knight. Alone, incredulous, asked. But only a sword master can become a great knight, right? He recalled what he knew about becoming a knight here. A Seiki Delier swordmaster is a superhuman who has transcended sword chi and unlocked a unique ability called enactment. Alone asked Evan. So you're saying Deus is already a swordmaster? He corrected, more precisely, he's on the verge of becoming one, but hasn't produced his own enactment yet. Evan recounted Deus's rise to knighthood. But in any case, the nation has given him the title of Great Knight. Not just because he won the duel with the fourth blade, but also because Caliban had lost a great knight to those northern barbarians. Hearing that, Alone suddenly remembered. Right, they've been at war for over a decade. Evan, also incredulous, said, it takes 15 years to sense and control mana. The enactment process needs at least a few decades. He recalled this empire's history. The first blade, Reinhardt, was 32 when he became the youngest great knight in history. The history of the heroic knight, revisited in Program 3, was accepted as a temporary comrade and would be removed after the chapter ends. Reinhardt had wielded a sword since he was 5. Have some faith in becoming the youngest sword master in history. Alone thought, yes, Reinhardt was unbelievably strong. Even with his talent, it took over 20 years. So how did a kid with no sword knowledge become a great knight? Suddenly a thought struck him. Wait. If he's just waiting for his enactment, could that mean he'll soon break through the hesitation and become a sword master? The idea pleased Alone so much he couldn't help blurting out. Maybe I can ride his coattails sooner than expected. Evan nodded in agreement. Alone stared at the messy pile of books on the table and fell into thought. Or maybe not. Probably impossible? Evan hurriedly waved his hand. No, he wouldn't do that. Alone exposed a fact, pulling the single letter tucked in the book out. I'm only getting letters from Yusha. He read Yusha's letter aloud. Even after she went to the Holy Nation, her letters came regularly, full of news about the great sinners she grew up with. It seems they still keep in touch. Alone felt a pang of loss. Even if they'd never seen me, they could at least thank me for the gift. I feel a bit guilty. He slapped his face hard as if to wake himself. Evan looked horrified at the gesture. Alone told himself, back to the point. I'm already deeply grateful they didn't raise the kingdom after awakening as the 5 great sinners. The two stood shoulder to shoulder by the sunlit window. Alone said reluctantly, as long as they're living well, I'm happy. Dusk over the capital Caliban, the central district, the mansion of a high noble, home to the famed solar eclipse cavalry. Inside, countless swordsmen were training. Deus, clad in armor, stood proudly on high observing the scene. He was introduced as Deus MacAllan, captain of the solar eclipse cavalry, the youngest great knight. From above, Deus looked down at the knights below with a cold gaze. Suddenly a girl below noticed him. The purple-haired lass waved. Big brother, he smiled and waved back, but Deus's expression darkened, and he sadly recalled. It's been exactly 1 year. Thinking back, he still felt ashamed for having lost everything to those dark ones. The horrifying images kept replaying in his mind. Childhood's painful memories surged back, leaving only uncontrollable rage. The image of his sister swallowed by darkness slowly slipping from his arms. Deus was held back by the darkness, increasing the distance between him and his sister. Hatred swelled within him. The miserable wandering of his childhood returned. Though drowning in torment, he still clutched his sister's hairpin. Deus's true thoughts gradually emerged. The fact that Dai Noyet saved my life isn't reason enough to swear loyalty to her. But because she promised I could take revenge with my own hands, I obeyed orders under the name Lam Noyet. From that moment, he began selling his life to Lam Noyet. Working as part of Lam Noyet meant going through many dangerous missions and training. Though death was always near, for the sake of vengeance Deus no longer cared for his safety. Memories poured like a torrent. Over the years he completed missions that would form the foundation to fight the dark. and very soon after, he received his first personal order. Deus was utterly surprised to receive a secret order. This is too unexpected. What is this? In the letter, Alone had revealed a small inn located south of Caliban. I left a gift there, go take a look. But Deus wasn't overly interested. The gift didn't excite him much. Still, he went to the spot Alone mentioned. Deus was a little curious. Maybe there's something here? When he opened the door, the scene inside stunned him into silence. In that unexpected letter, he saw the silhouette of his familiar sister. In that unexpected letter, he saw the silhouette of his familiar sister. The gift from Dai Noyet was the family I thought was lost forever. Deus hugged the little girl tightly and collapsed to the ground from joy and emotion. The girl hugged him back, tears streaming. Holding something dearer than life itself, Deus sobbed silently, unable to make a sound. The two reunited, clinging to each other in happiness. Deus still couldn't believe his eyes. My sister, whom I thought was dead, is alive. Only when their emotions calmed did they part slightly. He asked in a trembling voice, Silly, what happened after I lost you? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, Silly squeezed Deus's hand to reassure him. With his other hand, he gently wiped the remaining tears from his sister's eyes. They then went back inside and sat at the table to continue talking. Silly gripped her cup and slowly began to tell him, After those people took me in the darkness, I had to wait my turn for a long time. I was imprisoned in a dark cell. There were many other cells where captives huddled in desperate silence. I don't know how long passed, Silly recalled, and when it was my turn to be killed, I was the last one left standing. The walls and floor were littered with bloodied corpses. Silly let out a desperate scream. Her cloak was torn free, and a beam of light shone down. Someone grabbed her hand. She was able to escape with that light and survive. And years later, when she was nearly sold to a slaver, despair closed in again, especially when a giant hand grabbed her. At that moment, flashes of light from blades swept across. A figure appeared, swinging a sword and slicing that hand to pieces. The person quickly stood between Silly and danger. She remembered a mercenary named Evan who saved her. Silly went to open a cabinet. Afterwards, she received precious medicine from her benefactor. She picked up a letter bearing a note from Alone Palacio. I will continue to send medicine and protect you. You will be safe under the name Palacio. Don't worry about your brother either. Silly was deeply moved. She was immensely grateful for what he had done for her. When he learned this, Deus was astonished. He used his name to protect her? How could Dai Noyet have known about this? He quietly wrapped his arm around himself, full of doubt. I never told anyone about my family, and Yusha only realized the black sheep had taken her. So how? Deus suddenly remembered what Yusha had said. She knows everything. In his head, everything began to click into place. All his questions fit together like a jigsaw and dissolved. All his questions fit together like a jigsaw and dissolved. At the time, he couldn't understand Yusha's worry. She said something puzzling. A sword can't think for itself, right? Only now did Deus realize. Yet the fool was me. Good things will come. That was what Alone said. Deus pondered. Looking back, what he said then, he already knew everything, and he had hinted that the child would have to survive on their own. He couldn't help shivering as he stared blankly. Silly tilted her head in puzzlement. Brother, he came to his senses and gently stroked her head. Yet his mind wandered. The sword dared to act on its own, but he still chose generosity and compassion. And all this time Deus had thought he was being controlled by him, and meanwhile he could only gnaw on his bitterness and plans to get revenge on the black sheep. He sat at the table, servants bringing over a tray of hot food. Seeing the radiant smile on his sister's face, Deus suddenly realized his family's survival was a priceless gift. Yusha's cold voice echoed back in his memory. You'll understand soon enough. Why did I follow that man? He understood. She wasn't merely a fanatic, nor did she blindly trust him, and that letter urged you to come to Caliban and become a knight. He vowed quietly to repay him. His mission was to become a leader in Caliban, a great knight, and form his own order gathering the finest swordsmen. That faith was like sunlight piercing a dark world, snapping him out of his reverie. At that moment Deus's subordinate stepped forward to report, Captain, It's time. He moved up onto the high platform. Below, the knightly order stood in neat, disciplined ranks. Under the moonlight, each face was sharply defined, eyes resolute. Deus told himself this expedition would be the first stepping stone for the eclipse, and he didn't care what hardships would come. He stroked the purple-hued sheath of his sword, the moonlight glittering on the metal. Then, in that dim light, Deus coldly drew his blade, full of pride. I'll wait for the day I can offer my gratitude and a worthy repayment to please him. I'll prove it under the moon. On a day when snow fell white across the sky, the solar eclipse order set out on an expedition against the savage tribes. Meanwhile, at the Viscount's manor, Alone leaned against the wall with feeling so peaceful. Maybe because my kids have all grown up. A gust of wind flipped a page, sending a flurry of notepapers flying. He hurriedly grabbed them. They were all blowing away. Alone resumed the work he'd been doing. Let's see. After returning from the labyrinth, I focused on researching the keywords I'd been writing. He suddenly paused, wondering, why was I writing in cursive? From now on I'll write neatly. Alone nodded. Good, my reports are finished. On the page he concentrated on analyzing keywords, each undergoing different variations. Alone circled the word contraction. This reinforces flaws in magic. More specifically, contraction reinforces defects within each completed incantation, causing its range to expand. Additionally, contraction can break forms and alter the emitted object. Transformation, change of state. This is demonstrated when executed. It will repel, will break the form affecting the object's transformation. Regarding azure light, he noted reinforcing parallel magic such as lightning magic. When performed, it will spiral into a large sphere, releasing bolts of electric light. Besides that, the diffraction path has two major effects: penetration and critical hit. Specifically, the diffraction path grants piercing ability, which equates to a critical effect that increases the chance to kill an enemy. And crucially, in the keyword rules, if they're broken, the spell will fail. There are also a few notes. Don't use inappropriate keywords. Don't repeat the same word. Use at most 4 words. Alone scratched his head with his pen. With my mana core, I can only cast 1 spell per day, so it took a long time to discover all this. He recalled the days of research. In this world setting, Babylonia's hand signs and keywords had long been forgotten, so there was no information about them. No records existed of where they were written. Alone read many books but found nothing. In the end, he had to research on his own and found it a bit interesting even though he only learned self-defense magic. He then rose and went to the empty patch in the garden, raising his hand to fire bolts of lightning. All right, time to see the results of 2 months of experiments. One of Alone's hands took hold of the index finger of his other hand. From that finger more lightning condensed, spreading through the air, slowly coiling and converging at a point in the sky. He focused intensely, removing the focal point of this mana orb and creating an imbalance to trigger the lightning. This weak, useless magic was stubborn. Soon a sphere appeared in the air, spinning continuously. Alone muttered the compression mantra. The orb shrank from large to small, yet its force remained mighty. He proceeded to apply his research by invoking the breaking keywords. It began to brew a specific intent: blossoms in March. The lightning from Alone's hand gradually shifted to a blue hue. They intensified. From a mere orb it grew like the trunk of a great tree. The bolts spread out like branches. Seeing the result of his experiment, he couldn't help but admire himself. So order actually matters. Huh? Alone mumbled. Because when I used break first, it failed. Before he could finish, a shout cut through his thoughts. No way. Startled, he whipped around. At that moment 2 people who hadn't been there a moment before were standing there. Kalia looked pale and suspicious. Primitive magic? Alone stared at her in surprise. What? Why is Kalia here? The man beside her trembled. Using primitive magic meant he'd reached the rank of a 7th circle mage. He twitched at the corner of his mouth. Primitive me? In the reception room of the Viscount Palatios Manor, Kalia and Vinkle sat in silence waiting for Alone, Kalia visibly tense. Her mind was fluttering. She had 2 clear reasons to be here. First, to confirm Viscount Palatios' intentions. The one holding the trump card could cause severe damage to Zenonia. After all, Kalia now ran Zenonia, Her father was merely a puppet she pulled. So determining Alone's aims was her top concern. Second, to probe the level of the organization protecting him, the group that helped him manipulate Palacio. Though this reason wasn't crucial, Kalia was genuinely curious which mysterious group had backed Alone's rise. Instead, she discovered something else. She'd never imagined seeing this haughty mage trembling with fear. Indeed, right now Viancle beside her was shaking so badly he couldn't sit still. Viancle, a fifth circle mage expelled from the tower, due to his inhumane experiments he could wipe out an entire legion. He remained arrogant toward her despite her longtime patronage. A cold, brilliant mind capable of such cruel deeds. And yet now the man was trembling, his face ashen and drenched in sweat. Kalia stared in disbelief, sensing his fear. She'd never seen him like this. Her questions, was that really primitive magic just now? Were cut short by the sound of the door opening and a low voice breaking her thoughts. With just a single word to summon attention, Alone slowly entered the room. He came before Kalia and Viancle and coldly asked, "What brings you to these lands?" Kalia sat straight, careful and polite, saying, "Sorry for the sudden visit. I was so eager to meet you that," before she finished Alone politely interrupted, "I won't blame you," the young lady of Zenonia said. Then he folded his hands, looking at her seriously, his voice calm but firm. "However, let me make one thing clear. The thing I just used was not primitive magic. If you truly want to classify my magical ability, I'm only at the second circle level." He didn't hide it, cutting straight to the point. Pausing, he glanced at Viancle and confidently said, "The mage at your side surely realized that magic has no real effect." Inside he felt regretful, thinking sadly that it's unlucky the magic can't be used offensively or defensively. Hearing him, Kalia and Viancle shared the same thought. He meant he seemed to sense something from him. Viancle spoke in a low voice via sound transmission to warn, "Keep quiet about what you just saw." At that, Kalia tensed up. Viancle trembled and stammered a sincere apology to him. "You're right. It seems I misread it." Kalia looked at him puzzled and uneasy. Viancle was being unusually polite. Alone gave a slight nod to let it pass. Hearing him, he breathed a sigh of relief inwardly, feeling lighter. He wouldn't make things harder for them and bluntly said, "Good. Now that the misunderstanding's cleared, let's get to the main issue." Kalia hesitated before artfully saying, "I thought I should visit you after business is done." Alone coolly asked her again, "You don't actually have any special reason?"
Kalia, flustered, replied, "No."
Alone drooped his eyes wearily, implying, "What a pity. I have matters to attend to and can't stay long here. Be clever." Kalia quickly stood, exhaling politely. "I understand. Thank you for taking the time to meet me. We'll be on our way now." Alone leaned back in his chair, his tone half joking, half serious, suggesting, "If you need someone to talk to, I advise you to see Duchess Altia. I think you two would get along." Saying that, he looked straight at Kalia. Kalia's expression darkened a bit. She understood his words were no idle remark. After a few seconds of silence, she bowed in salute. "Yes, I promise, if you say so, I will visit her." Both Alone and Evan walked to the door to see the guests off. Watching the ornate carriage depart, Evan curiously asked Alone, "Why would someone from Zenonia, a declining Western house, come here?" Alone answered honestly, "I don't know. Can't even imagine the reason. But deep down I sense this will be troublesome. If a false rumor spreads that I used primitive magic, those who crave conflict with the powerful will start hunting me. I mean, this is a dark fantasy world. Just thinking about it, I imagined evil forces gathering to target me already." Back inside, Alone walked with worry, hoping she understood his hint. Zenonia would never go visit Altia, who competes in the underworld, and inwardly he also silently wished that they'd just leave him alone. The sky was clear as the carriage headed back. Kalia's voice drifted faintly outside. What the Viscount Palacio used, was it really primitive magic? She asked as she sat upright, awaiting Viancle's answer. Viancle's face hadn't recovered. He hesitated and replied, "No, it wasn't." Hearing that, Kalia asked again, "Then what was his reaction at that time?" Asked that, Viancle began to tremble. He explained gravely, Primitive magic is a type of sorcery that draws its own laws. On the curtain of absolute immutable principles, it's reserved for mages who've reached the pinnacle. However, what the Viscount used was different. As you asked, I employed my observing eye to examine his magic. While Alone and Kalia were talking, he secretly activated his duty. He truly saw a parted curtain emit a dark aura wrapping around him. The Viscount was tearing that very curtain apart. He was distorting the absolute immutable principles. He forced the thunder to fix, and the more Viancle spoke, the more unnerved he became, shouting that the observing eye had shown him unseen visions. Viancle yelled fiercely that he was breaking it and collapsing the laws, but even after doing all that, the magic still manifested. He had stepped into an impossible miracle. Hearing this, Kalia's face darkened. She widened her eyes in fearful disbelief at Viancle. Not stopping there, Viancle continued in a hoarse, low voice. But what happened next was truly chunks of ice cracking and a red, gloomy eye actually lying hidden deep within Alone. It was clearly that of a great forgotten god. At the thought, Viancle grimaced and slumped, his arm trembling as he clutched his head, muttering to himself to stop thinking. Thinking more would be dangerous. Suddenly remembering something, he raised his face and warned Kalia gravely. When I was young, I delved so deep into ancient lore, I was praised for my studies of the magic of the Forgotten Era. Let me be clear. Do not oppose the Viscount lightly. Kalia knitted her brows and bitterly asked him, So you mean someone insignificant like me investigating his intent is pointless? Viancle knew that Loria or Kalia were merely pawns toyed with by Alone, but he couldn't say it outright, only tersely advised via the sound transmission. I suggest you see Duchess Altia. Though he didn't state it, Kalia vaguely realized she had become his pawn. Years later, about 2 years after the children left the orphanage at Viscount Palacio's manor, just as Evan opened the door to his office, Alone called, Evan. When Evan stepped before him, he handled some papers with one hand while asking, Any news? If it's about the kids, even better. Evan hesitated and replied, Not about the kids. Then he continued, But it seems the Zenonia territory and the Altia Duchy have allied. Hearing this, Alone felt struck by lightning. He froze and asked Evan, What? The 2 top underworld forces have allied. Evan nodded. Camdone confirmed it. Since it's an underworld treaty, outsiders can't know, but I'm sure of it. Alone became a muddle of panic, inwardly cursing that he'd led the culprit down a different path. Now he faced an alliance of 2 masterminds. Is the Asterial Kingdom about to fall? Thinking that, he wondered, wait, did she really take my suggestion to heart? Recalling their last meeting, he had told Kalia, if you need someone to talk to, I recommend Duchess Altia. At the thought, he regretted it. Pushing aside wild thoughts, Alone reassured himself. No, it's probably just a temporary alliance. With Kalia's cold, proud nature, she wouldn't. Still, Alone reconsidered and decided he should at least prepare. Acting on it, he took a sheet of paper and seriously wrote a letter to Kalia. To Kalia, sorry if I seem blunt and cold. It's because I'm not good with words. I hope this doesn't come off as an excuse. Sunlight streamed through the window. After finishing the letter, he handed it to Evan and waved it off. This is for you, Evan. Before leaving, Evan promised. I'll deliver this to the lady of the territory via the Mercenary Guild, and I'll keep an eye on the children. The room was left with only Alone. He looked at the letters in his hand, pondering, wondering how Raiden and Seolang were doing. He hadn't heard from them since Yusha's letter said they'd arrive. Thinking of mischievous Seolang, he couldn't help but worry and pray she wasn't starving on the road. Thinking of the letter he'd sent Seolang, he trusted inwardly that if she found the gift he described, she'd become the pinnacle of all warriors. As far as he knew, the magic hand was the pinnacle artifact of the Golden Mane tribe. When equipped, it increases critical hit rate by 20%. If the proud culprit had obtained it, she wouldn't have fallen and become a criminal. Instead, she'd become a great wolfkin. That's what the item description said. Alone's gaze drifted to the sky. He fretted, wondering if he'd told the girl the location of the secret treasure intended as an emergency fund. I mean, she's competent enough to make her own way, so she'll be fine, right? That place is the nation of warriors. A land where strength can win you the world. The desert nation, wild and dust-swept. under a night sky studded with stars, deep within a rocky cavern. Xiaolang skipped along the rough dirt path toward the exit. Outside, she stretched and cried out in delight. Finally, the trial's over. Gazing at the magical hand artifact on her wrist, Xiaolang grinned ear to ear in gratitude. "Oh, great moon! Thank you for this gift." Flailing her arms, she chuckled and muttered in wonder. "I thought the Golden Mane tribe's essence was just a legend. Turns out what Mom told me as a kid wasn't mere fairy tale." Thinking this, her unbeaten wolf gaze drifted into the distance as old memories surfaced. As a child, she and her siblings huddled around their mother, and she had asked innocently, "The essence of the Golden Mane tribe?" Her mother gently ruffled her small head and, in a soft voice, said, "Yes, we wolves are descendants of the king of all beastkin, the Golden Mane tribe. The essence of the Golden Mane tribe is a legendary treasure passed down for centuries. It grants us power and authority. Obtaining it is no easy feat. Only those truly capable may claim this sacred relic." And now, the truth. She had won the essence. Xiaolang had traversed treacherous roads to reach this relic, placed on a precarious cliff edge. When she slipped it onto her hand, a merciless pain like dying and coming back ripped through her, and she overcame all the inner world's trials. Enduring those two horrors proved beyond doubt that Xiaolang deserved this relic in her hands now. Old memories tumbled through Xiaolang's mind. She was truly grateful to the Great Moon, her benefactor who saved her from death in a biological experiment. At her life's lowest point, with scars on her skin and a soul ready to give up, the Great Moon was the light that redeemed her life. He granted her the strength to avenge Black Dragon, who killed her parents. So Xiaolang resolutely swore that she would repay this debt. As if sensing her brave will, the essence relic on her hand flared with powerful energy. Xiaolang confidently tested the relic, convinced and telling herself that he certainly did not want her to become a mediocre fighter. From now on, starting here, Xiaolang paused slightly. Her eyes glittered with a strange light as currents of magic flowed into her. She vowed inwardly to become the strongest warrior, to revive the Golden Mane tribe by gathering its remaining members, and to kill Black Dragon with this. Then Xiaolang raised the essence-wreathed hand to the sky. This relic would be the proof of her oath of honor. The memory closed. Xiaolang stood silently in the desert night, looking up at tonight's bright moon. She remembered the Great Moon. Her voice drifted softly on the cool breeze. "All for him. Let's begin." Saying that, Xiaolang burst into a hearty laugh and skipped off forward. Now, in the silent midnight of the quiet colony, only Xiaolang's steady footsteps advanced. The image seemed to herald the future revival of great kings of the golden-maned beastkin under the blue moon after 500 years. Alone was absorbed in reading a document when Evan suddenly spoke up. "Oh, right," he said, sheathing his sword with a guilty look. "The Intelligence Guild has information on the kids. I meant to tell you at the training ground but forgot." Alone, not angry and remaining calm, asked, "All right, what's the news?" Evan recounted. "Xiaolang's doing splendidly at the settlement. She's even nicknamed the Golden Bolt." Alone frowned slightly. Golden Bolt sounded oddly familiar. "Anyway, glad to hear she's okay," he nodded. "Indeed, in that land, having strength lets you do anything." He pressed on, "What about Raiden?" "I haven't heard from him since he said he was apprenticing in Rax's." Evan said they had some info on him but were still verifying it. Alone fell into thought. "Is that so? Oh, and Evan." He shot a suspicious glare. "Aren't you terribly busy?" Evan wiped sweat, stammering. "Why are you suddenly looking at me like that? I've done everything you asked." Alone instructed, "You must prepare. It's at least a month to reach the magic tower." Evan jolted upright. "What? The magic tower? You never mentioned that to me." He rubbed his chin in surprise. "I didn't say?" Evan sighed. "I'm used to it." He looked doubtful. "But a month to the 6 magic towers is only about a week." He replied, "We're going to the Azure Academy." Hearing that, Evan nodded. "I see, it's near the Labyrinth City, so it's quite far." Finally he stood and left the room. "I'll start preparations immediately." Alone gave a subtle nod. After Evan left, he flopped into a chair and sighed. Another month in a carriage, the thought alone was exhausting. But what can you do? The item that can support my tiny precious mana core is there. Thinking that, Alone turned, propped his chin. Labyrinth City. Huh? That rings a bell. Back when I gamed, I spent ages grinding there. He closed his eyes and recalled, the labyrinth sits at the city's center, a special grind map. Players can get higher quality loot by leveling and delving deeper. Yet countless players have entered and none reached the true end. Back then Alone had to use a cheat to reach floor 150. He swore like a sailor. Devs are insane. There's more below. Why add floors nobody can clear? To watch us suffer. Is there any good loot on floor 150? Still, like in the game, achievements and relics kept being discovered there. Thus, the job of magical appraiser became so popular it guaranteed a wealthy life. Suddenly Alone remembered Rhine. She said she'd soon take the appraiser exam. With her talent, she'll breeze through it. Suddenly remembering Rhine again, he felt guilty. Maybe the gift I gave Rhine was too little compared to others. It only appraises gear. If that's insufficient, I should send her extra support. A starry evening in Labyrinth City, Larthania, a place ruled by no one. This is the city of explorers and mercenaries. In a narrow alley, past countless shops, in a southern corner you can find a secret appraisal shop called Murd, a low-key shop famed for its unique services. It mainly serves nobility and A-rank adventurers. Among them was the Lord of Larthania. Rhine announced the appraisal is complete. My lord, he asked in surprise. She held up the item and explained. This device uses mana to produce fire. The lord thanked her cheerfully as always. Let's see then. When he picked it up, Rhine guided him. It's a relic that can be inscribed. The lord, curious, asked. Inscribed with what ability? She replied calmly, it needs only a little mana to keep the flame for at least an hour. He couldn't help but laugh in admiration. Its efficiency has increased significantly. Very good. Everything done, the Lord departed. Before he left he turned and as usual said, thanks as always. From behind the counter a gentle voice answered, you're welcome. Waiting until the shop was empty of customers. She then reached up and removed her mask. Under the dim light, Rhine's beautiful face appeared. Her jade-green eyes clear but a little tired. She then turned toward another item on the shelf that looked like a small spyglass. Rhine picked it up and muttered, this item can also be reinscribed. No wonder this tucked-away shop is famous. It's all about reinscriptions. Carrying the item, Rhine opened a door and stepped into a back room. It was a gift from the great moon. Moonlight streamed through the window and fell fully upon an object hovering and glowing. She smiled softly at it. When he first told me to become an appraiser, I couldn't fathom why. Rhine remembered Alone's silhouette. His true identity was a friend of Palin from the age of the forgotten outer gods. I realized everything up till now was to destroy the dark beast. But back then she had read the letter instructing her to go to Labyrinth City Larthania and become a magical appraiser. At the time she couldn't link that command to the goal. Still, Rhine obeyed and went alone to Labyrinth City. Full of questions, she wondered how being an appraiser related to killing the dark beast. But what happened next changed her mind. The moment I saw his gift, I recognized it. The Prowler's Eye. It quickly identifies items below a certain mana threshold to aid appraisal. The moment her hand touched the eye she realized it was slightly different from what she knew. Its nature didn't even exist in the library. Then the seals surrounding the eye slowly dissolved. The chains binding it snapped open, it flared, and the single eye opened. Once the seal broke, the reinscription unlocked. Above the eye was a row of numbers over 500. She told herself to gain the fighting power to face the dark beast she must awaken this item. It is both an ability and a means for sacrificial offerings. Now the number on the Prowler's Eye had changed. It displayed 248/500. She raised the spyglass toward it and a beam of golden light shot out immediately. Soon, a holy sigil appeared on the body of the spyglass. Rhine chuckled wryly. I still have to offer 252 more items before it fully awakens. In exchange for boosting the relic stats, it will absorb something from the offerings, essentially altering this eye. Once, when she was appraising an item that displeased the eye, the previously accrued offering points were wiped clean. Since then Rhine was sure, it only reacts to specific high-tier relics, and if you sacrifice the wrong item the accumulated count vanishes. Thinking this, She smiled and nuzzled the eye, meticulously appraising all relics and selecting high-tier offerings to conceal. This is work only I can do because I was born with the eternal library. Rhine cradled it in her hands, all for killing the Black Wolf, all according to the will of the Great Moon. 3 weeks later, at the Azure Magic Tower, a carriage rolled quietly along the stone road circling the tower. Inside, Phinia, the tower's deputy head, frowned in annoyance. The tower master is absent at the moment. State your business and go. Seeing Alone remain silent, she grew more irritated. I'm busy, so be quick. He studied Phinia with a silent appraisal. She was a familiar face he'd seen in the main storyline. For now she remained deputy because the main plot hadn't started. In the game she was a rare genius who reached 8 circles by 20 and became the tower's master. Speaking of the Azure Tower, it's not only powerful in magic but also monopolizes production of certain essential goods, giving it status on par with the nobility. He was a bit displeased. Though the power of a deputy tower head, you're surpassing human limits, should be immense, this attitude is a tad annoying. Alone still tried to introduce himself. I am Count Ban Lao. As announced, I'm here to discuss the time gate issue. Over there Phinia was bustling. Right, I still need to deliver this document. But when he spoke, she asked, so what's the matter? Alone said calmly, I can remove the time gate. Phinia's hand holding the documents froze. The time gate is, well, a fissure linking to a mysterious subspace that appears where magic is frequently used. It spawns anomalies that cause serious damage, but unpredictable, dangerous monsters no one can foresee. She eyed him analytically, then sneered after a moment. With such mediocre talent, what do you intend to do? Phinia didn't hesitate to wave him off. Fine, just go home. Alone was flustered. Wait, isn't that wrong? I need an answer. She cut him off irritably. You're going to remove the time gate and grab the treasure? Right, of course you'd do that. Phinia slammed her hand on the table in fury and shouted. Is that so? Do you know how many people come here daily for that? Alone tried to persuade her. I'm serious. Lead me to the time gate and I'll prove it to you. He felt wronged. Why doesn't she believe him? Honestly, her tone suddenly grew low. Look, I get that you need a big achievement to reverse public opinion, since people are slowly learning the only reason you became a count was luck when your brothers died. However, that doesn't mean you can bring your personal mess here to cause trouble. Saying that, Phinia released power that shook the space. Alone was startled and staggered back. Luckily, Evan caught him. He marveled. Rumors like that spread? Probably because I've kept too low a profile, even if it's true. She looks like a workaholic but knows outside news astonishingly well. Phinia's gaze now seemed to crackle with sparks and supreme anger. Alone involuntarily shivered. She's terrifying. Not a joke. She puts me in my place when I'm even slightly annoyed. Evan leaned in and whispered, that's only her mana. I swear we'd be snapped in half if we picked a fight with her. Alone steadied himself and regained resolve, though he was pretty desperate, so he stepped forward to negotiate. If I can't erase the time gate, I'll give all my possessions to the magic tower. Phinia still didn't believe him and kept spouting nonsense. I see. Alone's eyes filled with determination. If you wish, I'll swear an oath. This isn't a bad offer for a bit of your time. Don't you think so? She paused for a moment at that, a flicker of hesitation crossing her expression. After a while Phinia led him to a door. The time gate was in there as promised. All your assets will be mine the moment you fail. Alone, confident, said that won't happen. She leaned her head against the door and looked at him, thinking to herself, perfect timing. I've been wondering whether he's the mastermind of the domain or just a lucky useless fellow. After listening to him for a bit, I believe he's more the latter. Phinia curled her lips in contempt and assessed him. Contrary to the inhuman aura around him, he only has a small mana core and slightly above average energy sensing. His talent barely touches the second circle. What can he do with that? Pathetic. In fact, the truth is you don't really need to close this gate. In 3 months it will naturally vanish after expelling a relic. The research will end then and no magician capable of sealing the time gate would appear. However, the time gate at the Azure Magic Tower has continued wreaking havoc for over 2 years. Now Alone slowly stepped toward the cracking time gate. Phinia shrugged as a warning, if you can't do anything, just leave the room. He ignored her words and began weaving hand signs. She frowned skeptically. You intend to use your hands as a conductor instead of a staff? Even ancient grimoire classifications separate those methods. That's a primitive method. It's almost a fairy tale technique. Phinia couldn't help but sneer and try to stop him. For heaven's sake, stop miming and get out of here. Alone ignored her and began chanting. Suddenly everything went pitch black around them. Her face drained of color, cold sweat trickling down her nose. I can't move. No, everything has stopped moving. Phinia quickly cast mana Na into her eyes, trying to peer around. Before her, a gigantic crimson eye was tightly shut. It was only for an instant. The eye opened, the pupil a deep blood red that seemed to gouge into Phinia's soul. She focused on those mysterious circles and fell into thought, something unknown. Seeing its essence was simple. This must not be allowed to happen. Phinia raised a hand to touch something, stopped, cut the thought off. What is understood must never be recognized. Cut off your thoughts, really. The red eye continued to stare unblinkingly. After a moment, a giant hand gently reached toward Phinia, prompting a fleeting thought. An absolute command. She widened her eyes, her face now beaded with sweat from fear. I understand the command. The eye shrank, then squeezed shut, leaving Phinia bewildered as she looked up. She stood frozen, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly Alone spoke, making Phinia jump. The gate is closed. As soon as he finished, he held something in his hand and mused to himself. It was as easy as flipping my palm. All I needed was the item and a special method. Then Alone said, I'll take the relic. Sharon vomited up. He looked at Phinia and pondered. I need to use it a few more times, so I used a persuasive charm. I wonder if she'll believe me. Phinia's face was terrified, stammering, Yes, I won't tell anyone. Alone sighed, thinking his bluff had failed. He stepped toward Phinia. I'm flattered, but it's unnecessary. Phinia recoiled in fear and shouted from the back, Yes, I'll keep absolute secrecy. I won't tell anyone. Terrified, she kept backing up and yelled, I can keep a secret. Really, I'm serious. Alone still didn't understand, puzzled. Why is she acting like this all of a sudden? He turned away and called to Evan, Let's head back. No sooner had they moved than Alone heard a voice from behind him. Please wait a moment. Phinia immediately opened a box and thrust it toward him. This is a mana recovery potion I made myself. Please take it. Alone picked up a vial and inspected it. A potion personally made by the deputy head? And a top-grade one at that? Phinia asked, Do you like it? Alone stood dumbfounded, thinking, these 2 vials are worth as much as several lower-grade ones combined. I checked the price and nearly choked. Then Alone wondered, is she so grateful I closed the gate? Phinia blanched in embarrassment. That was what the Count requested. I'll absolutely keep silent. Seriously. Suddenly she mischievously added, of course. A maoth. Should I swear a maoth? Alone was helpless, thinking, really? This petty thing needs an oath? After a moment he said wait a bit and then thought to himself. She seems to be misunderstanding something. Suddenly many chains fell from nowhere around where they stood and quickly wrapped tightly around them. Phinia shouted again. See? I keep my promises very well. Alone sighed and turned back. I understand. Then he moped. She shows no sign of clearing up this misunderstanding. A fleeting thought later, and at the Azure Tower he'd acquired the relic he wanted, 5 potions and an oath. Early the next morning, in front of a grand, imposing tower, Evan stared at the object Alone wore on his wrist and asked, Is that the treasure that fell from the gate? Hard to retrieve, huh? But it looks more primitive than I expected. Is the performance any good? Alone gently touched the object and replied, Well, anyway, this is something I absolutely needed. He stared at the trinket. The mark of the impudent. Good, I got it safely. The gem set in the bracelet can absorb and store ambient mana. The device on Alone's wrist suddenly glowed, making him exclaim. It works well, he mused. Storage capacity isn't large, but with my mana core it's more than enough. Then Alone stared into the distance. A body with less mana than even a support item. He set his resolve. No, his goal was to study magic and protect himself, not to fight. Alone sat in a corner nodding. This is enough. He thought of Phinia again and wondered, by the way, what exactly did Phinia misunderstand? Alone suddenly recalled that odd polite attitude. He remembered Phinia. Please come in. Alone turned to introduce himself. Let me be clear. I am a second circle mage. Phinia responded warmly. I know, you very much seem like a second circle mage. Alone was thrown into confusion. Is she mocking me? Back in reality, he sat quietly pondering. This reaction was like Kalia's last time. He continued to recall images of Kalia. Over here. Phinia forced a smile, still uneasy. Alone gazed out the window pensively. After all, he probably wouldn't meet any of them again, so it should be fine. Sunlight blazed down. Below, a carriage rolled by and voices rose. Lovely weather, someone replied. Yes, very peaceful. Outside, the Altia Duchy was unusually quiet. Loria held a teacup and said gently, Long time no see. I hope you have a pleasant time, Miss Zenonia. Kalia smiled and replied, Of course. Being around you doesn't change anything. I'm truly happy to see you again. Loria coquettishly said, How convenient that we don't need to haggle over rank or power. Kalia added, The far-sighted vision of Count Palacio astonishes once more. She thought of Alone. Visiting the Altia Duchy seemed like a good idea. Kalia pondered and, following his advice, quickly grasped the true intention. That evening, during conversation, both realized they were inferior to Palladio. Loria and Kalia's mouths dropped in surprise. Whatever the reason, it was an alliance built on Count Palacio's command. Alone's imposing image made any power struggle meaningless when standing beneath the absolute number one. Two insignias appeared. Zenonia and Altia had become more comfortable allies. Loria wondered the conference was next month. Why visit today? Kalia explained. The Count sent a letter citing the day I came to visit. Loria gently opened the letter. I wonder what's inside. The letter discussed talks between noble houses. It read, Milady, I hope you are well. Regarding your previous visit, a few nobles grumbled to me about it. Thus there aren't many nobles suitable for me. Please understand. Kalia said, It looks like a perfectly ordinary apology letter. But Loria added, There's definitely some plot hidden inside. Kalia agreed at once. Yes, I think we should discuss it. And so the two of them chatted together. Not many nobles suitable for me. Huh? Baron Kenya is on the nobility side and Marquis Morantian is one of the royal faction's key figures. Viscount Bilanda belongs to the royal faction. Duke Faldian is a leading noble figure. Among the nobles he spoke with at the ball, Kalia finally summed up briefly, he dislikes both the nobility and the royalists. A horrifying thought. So he's going to kill them all? Loria said calmly, we should draw conclusions based on reason. Kalia quickly replied, I agree. Loria slowly said. Then she emphasized that he wants to eliminate the current nobles. When they realized the truth, both went pale with fear. Loria stared and said, That's what it means. Kalia, also terrified, added, and create a new government. Loria glared up at the sky in displeasure. That's why Altia needs its reputation and wants me to be duke. The atmosphere turned awkward. If the Western overlord were beside him, Kalia would certainly resist. Seems like it. The two of them then said we should plan it. Meanwhile, at the Azure Tower a voice rang out. Count Palacio. Do you mean he's like the Stargate? Phinia flopped wearily onto the table. Yes, the Tower Master asked curiously. Tell me the details. She looked up and sighed. And so the pieces of the picture were randomly formed, moved chaotically, and snapped into place. Over here, Evan asked anxiously, Are you okay? Alone put a hand to his mouth and replied, I suddenly choked on a sweet potato. He still spoke calmly but looked fine. Evan handed over water saying, Here's some water. Alone took it and thanked him. He wore a doleful, gloomy expression. I want to go home so badly. Then he thought Yusha's letter should be arriving soon. The sky grew dim. Beneath a statue of a goddess, Yusha stood motionless. Then she gently smiled with an embarrassed face. Cut to the Azure Tower. At that moment someone's voice rang out. Oh Phinia dear, my disciple, I'm back. He had just returned and glanced around. Strange, I no longer sense the Time Gate's presence. This person is the tower's master, Archmage 8 Circle Selim Micardo. Seeing her like this he wondered, did something happen while I was away? Across from him, Phinia answered in a shrinking voice. Tower Master, you've finally returned. I've completed every task you assigned. Seeing her demeanor, the Tower Master was a bit surprised. Phinia, what's wrong? Selim asked softly, but Phinia didn't even bother to answer. This made him ponder inwardly. The girl isn't throwing her usual tantrum. What on earth happened? Because Phinia had early become Deputy Tower Master thanks to innate talent since childhood. Her ego and arrogance had skyrocketed to the heavens. She probably just made some new recruit burst into tears again. Still, I never intended to curb that trait. Her passion for magic is pure. Once she reaches 7 circles, she'll realize how little her past achievements amount to and naturally rein herself in. That's why her current composure looks so strange. Selim stepped forward to comfort her, saying, listen, my northern expedition took quite long this time. Could the backlog of work while I was gone have worn you out? She turned to the Tower Master with a pleading look. After a moment, Selim finally understood everything. So the Count sealed the time gate, but because of the oath, you can't reveal the exact method he used? In response, she gave a slight shake of the head. After all, there weren't many details to recount about the closing of the gate. It's all I can present. Somehow her sad demeanor seemed to amuse Selim a little. Could the thing that humbled Phinia really be some inexplicable magic? Or more precisely, primitive magic, right? The girl was so terrified she didn't even bother to resist when I touched her. Count Palatino of the Kingdom of Asteria? Fascinating. He's someone I need to keep an eye on. Time passed quickly. Cut to the protagonist's location. It's been a month since leaving the Azure Tower. After snatching the impudence trinket, I began seriously delving into sigils, since my daily magic allowance has been increased. Important note. The rules for operating sigils and spells break if these criteria aren't met. Don't use nonsensical magic, don't repeat the same element, and use no more than 4 types of magic. Combining similar phrases can create resonance. Newly discovered patterns suggest a given sigil must be arranged scientifically. I guess that, and thankfully I've grasped a new operating rule for polymorphic sigil clusters. This might relate to technique and positioning when I set up the magic, though I'm not completely certain yet. Evan happened to pass by and came up to ask, every time I see it, your magic seems stronger than before, my lord. Is that so? Alone sighed wearily at that. It hadn't matched a second circle mage's level before, but now it's at a whole different scale from a few months ago. I think deploying an ordinary gravity spell couldn't have made a pit this deep, he mused silently. Gravity is only a second circle magic. Pushed to max power, it still shouldn't be able to pulverize an entity so completely. I once thought I was getting stronger. Was that a false sense? If there's a real cause for this power spike, it's certainly not due to mere proficiency or sigils. After all, improving magical mastery only boosts precision and practical casting. Sigils act like trigger keywords to alter properties. I spent months analyzing the sigil matrix for gravity and recently swapped nearly synonymous phrase clusters for one another. In the end, I realized the potency only rises when you find the optimal arrangement. It's not just an illusion. Otherwise, it's absurd. There's no basis for a spell's destructive power to suddenly surge like that. Maybe I've just been in peak condition lately. Meanwhile, Evan, making small talk, pulled out a letter and said, "Oh, I'm here to deliver a letter from Yusha. It's just arrived." Alone nodded, "Thanks. Thanks, Evan. I'll go back to my room and mull it over when I have free time." "Oh, are you going into the study?" "Yes, I've used up all 3 of my spell casts for today." The protagonist replied, walking and thinking, what root phrase caused my power to surge so suddenly? Could that be the benefit gained from a curse? A curse as an ancient Eastern ritual where the caster accepts self-sacrifice to harm others or themselves. When bearing a curse, the target suffers but simultaneously gains compensatory power. But there's no one here versed in Eastern occult arts, so that possibility is out. Could it be the power of faith? But coming from account of a minor state forgotten by the underworld, that sounds implausible. Well, sometimes you should just put your worries aside and get on with life. After all, nothing bad comes from that, right? In another development in the Rosario city-state, the capital Rhinal, a pristine city where residents worship Chironia, goddess of the moon and peace, at the Eastern Chapel. While Yusha was praying there, a knight approached from behind and said, "Greetings, sister." Sensing who had come, Yusha gently turned and replied, "Welcome, Sir Knight Loke. Everything going well?" At that moment Loke thought to himself, "She's a nun ranked below a holy knight. She can't even wear the blessed sash. Yet I still must keep a respectful attitude." Having thought that, the knight bowed and began his report. "Yes, this time we rescued 8 children and 25 civilians from a remote village between the eastern and western borders. This success is all thanks to you, sister." Yusha shook her head, refusing the credit. "Not at all, it was you who performed those noble deeds." Loke replied, "And it was you who enlightened someone as ignorant as me. I will forever be grateful. For 20 years I drowned in despair because I couldn't sense any divine power at all. I almost gave it all up," he recalled. As Loke sat panting like an ox after training, Yusha's voice sounded not far away. "If there's something you yearn for so desperately, try placing your faith in the moon." "The moon?" He wondered in despair and doubt. Yusha said little, replying with an enigmatic line. "You'll understand many things once you actually do it." Back in the knight's mind, he was so desperate he was willing to try anything. "I sincerely prayed to the moon for days, just as she instructed, and then miraculously I could use divine power. I was overjoyed, but that led me to briefly succumb to temptation by placing faith in the moon instead of goddess Chironia. I feared I was sliding into heresy. Still, all divine source power shares the same nature. Even the holy relics blessed in the goddess's name shone human-like when I touched them. That was clear proof of the divine power I possessed. But why did you advise me to trust the moon, sister?" In response, Yusha began to enlighten him. "Faith originates from an invisible belief and takes a long time to manifest. It's always easier when you seek what you need in something visibly present. That moonlight will always watch over and support you. Whether under some charm or not," Loke agreed as if it were obvious. "I understand, because the goddess herself is the symbol of the moon. This is a way for the skeptical to find an absolutely reliable anchor for their deepest desires." He bowed gratefully. "Sister, I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart." Returning to the present, Yusha spoke up. "If you want to show your gratitude, let's perform the prayer ritual together." Loke responded, placing his hand on his chest. "I'm willing to do it as many times as needed." "You arrived just in time. The ceremony is about to begin and everyone has gathered." Yusha led Loke into the sanctuary, which had already drawn a great crowd. She walked slowly to the center of the sanctuary. Loke also found a seat. "Now let us pray together. The moon is clearer than ever tonight. Everyone, face the great moon." Back to the protagonist. Alone held the letter Yusha sent and sighed in boredom. Today's letter was nothing special, mostly just daily chit-chat. That means everyone is doing fine, which is good. Indeed, but it still makes me a bit sad that no one writes to me except Yusha, even though everyone's fine. If I think from their perspective, it's understandable. They probably see me as a stranger uncle they've never met, just a kindly passerby. Anyway, I achieved my goal of guiding them onto the right path so they won't destroy the world. So there's no reason to be sad. No reason at all. Alone's resolve wavered a little. Yusha must be very busy, yet she still writes to me regularly. I raise 5 kids, but only the eldest ever seems to acknowledge my efforts. Just as Alone was quietly crying inside, his friend Evan suddenly spoke up. "Count, are you busy?" Evan's unexpected question made Alone jump. "Hey, you're still here?" He didn't need to fetch a scrap of paper and said, "Oh yes, I just received some news about the kids from the Information Guild, so I wanted to report it to you right away. About Raiden, the one you asked about last time. He's become a pirate now." This information really planted question marks over the protagonist's head. A few seconds later he stammered, "Can you elaborate?" So the two of them went to the tea table. Guard Evan began recounting what he'd gathered. First up, the most talked about person is Sealrang, and Sealrang has achieved a 32-win streak out of 100 matches. That's the requirement for her to become a Baba Yaga. Hearing that, Alone blinked and asked back, "A 32-win streak? Wait, the fighter with the longest streak is..." Before he could finish, Evan nodded. "The Lion King with a 41-win streak." At this, Alone couldn't help but admire. Lion King is far too strong. Having joined a player's party briefly, this colony relies on many powerful individuals to flaunt its military might. And she's about to surpass the colony's top contender? Unaware of his thoughts, Evan continued his report. As for Deus, His cult executed one of the 8 chieftains of the barbarian tribes in the Snowlands, the leader of those who transform into monsters through rituals. You know them, right? As for the protagonist, of course he'd be familiar with this plotline. He thought inwardly, I know them very well. Back in the game I had to fight the barbarian tribe and defeat their god, Ultultus. Lucky it's not a face-off now. Ultultus only appears when the 5 great sins assemble, an insanely hard encounter. Thinking that, Alone relaxed. Well then, seems I don't need to worry about Deus anymore. Evan chimed in happily. With this, he's now considered on par with the top sword. Learning that the kid he's sponsoring grew so strong, Alone began planning to cling to him. Maybe I really should go meet him. Might be lucrative. Ignoring the protagonist's fantasies, Evan added, and Rinna. She's become an appraiser. She can now carve black patterns onto artifacts to boost their power. Such a thing exists? Fascinating. She's probably living well in her own way. Alone nodded in agreement, but his tone began to change. So the crux is that the runt actually became a pirate? Now that they were onto the main point, Evan's expression turned a bit more serious. Have you heard of the 7 Isles off the Torn Sea? It's where the great pirates hang out. He became the captain of the first isle, the largest of them all. At this, Alone seemed to collapse with disappointment. No way. Some forum post I once laughed off is now my real life. I didn't send it to the Torn Sea for that reason. Raiden is excellent at finding enemies. Plus, being a rare sea deity, he can move freely underwater. The Torn Sea also holds many precious relics, so I advised him to become a treasure hunter. A promising career. I used to specialize in finding foes too. Seeing Alone so desperate, Evan tried to console him a bit. Being captain of a mighty pirate band is practically equivalent to being the island's lord. Now he's become an extremely important figure. Probably, Alone replied, but the looks of despair didn't fade. He kept wondering how on earth the runt had ousted the First Isle's captain. All the captains are formidable, and none had ever lost a naval battle to anyone. Maybe he only salvaged the truly valuable relics from the old era. I also wanted to get my hands on a top-tier relic, so I ground many hours for treasure hunters. So he armed himself and seized the captain's position. I know the world doesn't always run my way, but this stings. Is this what it feels like to have a child turn pirate? Thinking that, Alone went pale as a sheet, like he might go sell salt at any moment, which made Evan nearly pee his pants. Count, are you all right? Cut to the giant port city of Raxus. Across the bay lies the pirate heaven of the 7, and the largest among them is the first archipelago. The great pirate, the Red Slayer, used to be captain here. He traded wealth for the protection of the Celestial Warden. And this is the one who defeated him to become the new captain of the first archipelago. Raiden now wore an expression of deep irritation. I just don't know, what is the Great Moon anyway? I never cared enough to think deeply about it. At first he was simply someone I was grateful to. I should have died like a slave cut open. But thanks to him I met Yusha and awakened my powers. Honestly, I feel like I'm following Yusha's orders while serving as a blue moon. So when I received a direct command from the Great Moon, I really couldn't comprehend it. What does it even mean to become a treasure hunter? It even fills me with disgust. I must start my revenge as soon as possible. Those black things, they slaughtered an entire tribe. We were living peacefully on an island nobody even knew about. On the continent we were lucky enough to escape to. Those damn hunters killed my parents when they were exhausted, and sold me off like a slave. I don't see how becoming a treasure hunter and that gift have anything to do with my vow of vengeance. On the very day the runt set foot here, at least I have to pretend I'm following orders. Why is it so noisy over there? Raiden turned his attention to the nearby ship. Wanted posters were just appearing on the board behind them. He immediately probed with his power. The bastards who destroyed everything for Raiden were all here. A scarred man sneered and said, only the chosen great pirates can receive the Celestial Warden's protection through wealth. The selected captains of the 7 Isles are eternal. By now the runt couldn't hold back his murderous intent. I found the bastards who killed my parents. So they finally seized power, huh? That Celestial Warden is deliberately spreading deceitful lies, claiming that only through a sacred ritual using parts of the sea god's body can one receive the power bestowed by the sea god Ko-Lai. And every captain of the 7 Isles once held that power. They're celebrating. oblivious to the disaster about to strike. Those cursed hunters tore my parents' bodies to pieces. Raiden's fury exploded.